Yes, Neil, if we could at this stage play the Andy Purdy video. I found it quite fascinating. We'll have a talk after you play it.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to grab the screen again and play that. Okay. Gavin, can you see a web browser with lots of tabs?
Yes, I can.
Okay, if you could switch your videos off and mute, okay, just for the bandwidth issues, please. And we'll try and get this going.
Are you telling me that this is not?
I don't believe so.
You don't think this is an
No.
honest to God autopsy photo?
No, I don't.
What do you think it is?
I don't know.
It's being phonied someplace. It's make-believe.
I'm just a patsy, said Lee Harvey Oswald, for whom judgment came moments later in the basement of a Dallas police station.
There is Lee. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's the man with a gun.
The silencing of Oswald by Jack Ruby leaves only the official version of who killed John Kennedy and how, a version most Americans do not believe. Experts tell us the murder of JFK had the mark of an experienced assassin. Could Oswald have done it alone? No FBI marksman has been able to duplicate the series of shots Oswald is alleged to have fired from the window in the school book depository. Oswald was also charged with the murder of Dallas policeman J.D.Tippit. Some experts believe that if Oswald did kill Tippit, it might have been in self-defense.
It's possible that Oswald, when confronted with Officer Tippit, came to realize that maybe he was about to be killed to be silenced and defended himself and killed Tippit.
Purdy suggests that Officer Tippit and Ruby could have been part of a conspiracy.
It may be that Jack Ruby and others were involved in a conspiracy to silence Oswald. It may be that Officer Tippit, by himself or with others, was involved in a conspiracy to silence Oswald also. And that when the attempt to kill Oswald by Officer Tippit failed, then Jack Ruby was a fallback.
If Oswald was silenced to prevent him from talking about a conspiracy, or if he was manipulated into the role of fall guy, who was involved? Some experts think that it was renegade members of the CIA. Others think it was the mafia. And some think that it was elements of the CIA and the mob working.
Is that okay, Gavin?
Yeah, that's fine. Do you want to unshare that, or what do we do now?
We can see you.
Okay. Look, I just found that fascinating to hear somebody who was on the HSCA as one of the lawyers, you know, following a lot of the investigation, to actually come up and say that. I just, what did he just wake up one morning and he just decided that popped into his head? That's come from somewhere, that, and I just found that quite fascinating. I also sort of related that to the sort of interviews that Mike Brownlow and them did. You've probably seen one that was uploaded recently with Mrs. X from Austin's Barbecue that talked about Tippit and Oswald and Ruby, and I think they sort of suggesting it was the Moran Shield with them. But yeah, no, I just was, when I first saw that, I remember thinking, wow, that's surprising, but it kind of lines up with where I'm at. If you want to, Neil, we can move to what I'm putting here with the stage scene, what that was all about.
Sorry, do you want me to play a video, or do you want me to show a map? What do you want me to do?
Yeah, which is the video? Is that the
next video I've got is Murray Jackson.
No. We'll do the stage scene. So let's hold the video. So the stage scene.
Do you mean the Scoggins thing, or do you want to talk?
We'll just hold the Scoggins one. We'll just go with this at the moment.
Okay.
We'll do it shortly. So the stage scene, why I'm calling it a planned clandestine interception at a given point, is that there's three elements to it. We can talk a little bit about what Helen saw a little bit later, but the crux of this is the fact that we've got a planted witness, which is what Helen Markham told her family she was. We've got the arrest of Oswald, which is why she was there. And we've got the stage fight disturbance incident up at 10th and Marsalis. So just to touch on the planted witness. So Helen is not on her way to work. She's not heading down the street to catch a bus. And we'll have a little discussion later on about exactly where she was. She's playing a role. And as we'll find out very soon when we listen to the Scoggins tape, William Scoggins was in a similar position. He was told to be there and to observe, and that was his role. So Helen Markham is doing exactly the same thing. What she was told she was there to watch was the arrest of Oswald. And of course, it became very clear why they're talking like that is it's not just the arrest of anybody, it's the arrest of Oswald, because the family knew Oswald, because they said that he was working with the gang. Now, for how long and exactly that whole arrangement, I haven't got a lot of detail. So the Markham family is saying that Helen was not aware there was going to be shooting. Now, that's what they're saying, and I accept that. Whether that's the case, I don't know. But what we've got is a planted witness who's been put in position to watch the arrest of Oswald. You then have the arrest itself relates to information that was passed on directly relating to her husband, William, in that William and James took Oswald on a break and enter and involved theft of a house in, I presume, in the Oak Cliff area. That's their patch. And she openly admitted they paid $1,000 each, which is quite a lot of bucks back in that day, to do that. And that was to link him to the break and enter. And that is supposed to be the arrest that was going to go down, that she was to watch. The third part of the staged event is that we've got the fight come disturbance scene that was manufactured at 10th and Marsalis. Now, that had appeared in some books in the past. I think Harry Livingston had put it in and some others. So the family is not saying they have an involvement in that actual event being staged. I have my doubts. I think there's a possibility that they have got some sort of involvement. This is their patch. This is why James was selected, because it's his patch as the leader of the gang. As we'll talk about a little bit later, these things then tie in together, because I think there's also some evidence from the radio calls that suggests that that incident, staged fight scene disturbance down at 10th and Marsalis, was the area that Oswald had then left and walking on the footpath, heading in a westerly direction. And then, of course, we've got Officer Tippit coming in the opposite direction, just happens to intercept him right where planted witnesses are staged. So that's fairly good from my perspective of saying that's a setup. When I looked at the whole thing with, Oswald the patsy, I looked at it pretty simply that there's only one agency can deal with Oswald as the patsy. So he didn't shoot JFK. He's been set up for the whole thing. They then have three choices. They let Oswald fly out of the country and live happily ever after somewhere. They arrest him and he goes on trial. That sort of did happen, but it didn't go down too well. Well, the third option is they take him out. I think the third option is exactly what was supposed to happen there and then. Again, I'm jumping a little bit ahead of things here, but there's a bloke that wrote a book. You've probably seen it. For those that haven't, it's this one here, Thomas Buchanan, Who Killed JFK. If you haven't got that, and Neil, I can send you that link, because I've got the updated version I've found for free on the internet, so I can send that link to people. But that's a very interesting book because Buchanan wrote that in May 1964. All right, so we're not even halfway through the Warren Commission hearings. He came out for the Ruby trial on behalf of some French newspapers. He's an American. He was a World War II vet. He was a captain in the army. He had some police contacts clearly in Dallas, and he talked about Detective Bill, I think he refers to him in the book. But when I first started looking at this, and then what he's talking about, he's clearly identifying the Dallas police involvement. My background with surveillance and you know, mobile surveillance, foot surveillance, all those sort of things. There is no way in the world Oswald left the book depository without a number of players with eyes on him, because they can't lose him. They cannot afford to lose him. He's critical to the cover-up. They have to resolve the patsy. So that's the event, the stage scene that has been explained to me, and that the players that are involved in setting that up are Ruby, as I've said, James Markham, Floyd Hamilton, and the authorities. Floyd Hamilton, we'll just touch briefly on him. He was the guy that was looking after all of the stolen goods on behalf of the gang. Now, you're aware of his background. I think it's Helen's uncle. He's a Hamilton. He's from the Bonnie and Clyde group. His brother, trying to think of his name. Sorry, I can't think of his name, but he actually was executed in prison for Bonnie and Clyde related criminal activity. Ray Hamilton was his name. Floyd's a born again. He lives in Dallas. He was on the circuit, sort of helping wayward prisoners, convicts rehabilitate. He was connected with W.O. Bankstown, who was connected with Decker. So there's quite a lot of material you can find online about that sort of information and relationship. He was paroled under their care. He was in Dallas, and he's been involved in this, according to the family. It's somebody that I had not heard of really much at all related to this. But he was the fence for the group. He was responsible for all their stolen goods. James Markham idolised this guy. So that's basically the stage scene. I know that if you look at the Brownlow Pulte stuff, they also have talked about this. I put what Mike has told me in a separate annex, towards the back of the document, as that's their story. But there's certainly some parallels. When I asked Laverne about the stabbing, I said, well, it was all staged. She was quite adamant. No, there was a stabbing. And her reason was exactly the same as the reason that Brownlow had come up with. And these two have never met. Brownlow died a couple of years ago. And the reason is that someone in that group had second thoughts and didn't want what was going to happen to Oswald to go down. Now, because I remember saying to Mike years ago, this scene, the blood you're talking about, it sounds like a Hollywood little play. And he was adamant, no, stabbing occurred. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out why. This didn't make a lot of sense. If you're staging something, why actually stab somebody? But then it does make a little bit of sense when you realise that, according to the Brownlow's information, the person was bundled into the car and driven off. Well, you don't normally do that if you stab someone on the street. You normally take off. But anyway, look, that's the information that I've gleaned. I could just touch on something there about, so what's going to happen to Oswald the Patsy? I think you have to ask yourself which one of those three options is going to occur. If you think he's going to be arrested and go to trial, then the theatre works. So does 10th Street, Patton Street. If you think he's going to be eliminated, I think Patton Street, 10th Street works, simply because once you've gone to the theatre, you've got a very different environment there. I think there was possibly 20, someone said 24 patrons in the place. You've got staff that you haven't got. You've then got a controlled situation at 10th and Patton that's gone and moved. And if he's escaped and gone on foot, but if if that's the case, you've now got police involved in this that were not originally part of the interception plan. So things have gone a little bit out of control. I think if it was a stage scene at the theatre, we would have heard he's got a gun, bang, bang, in a controlled environment. And we didn't hear that. And that's what leads me to believe that what I've learned from this information that's been passed to me is that that's where that was supposed to happen. And I think in an operational planning environment, I'm not telling you something you don't know, but you have to think of the what ifs, and when you do your appreciation of all the different scenarios that can occur. And I think they made just one big mistake. Tippit just had to have an offsider, because if Oswald shot, the other person would have shot Oswald. And I think we'd be hearing a very different story about what happened. So that's kind of my read of the information that I've got and how it sort of fits. The key issue here is having the Markhams, and as you'll hear in a second, the Scoggins, saying they are planted witnesses. And you'll hear Mr. Scoggins in a minute, Ken Scoggins, the grandson, clearly say the information was imparted to William Scoggins the night before by a mob associate of Ruby. The message was coming from Ruby to be there in position. And you got people in position, well, they're not just going to watch him get arrested and taken down the police station. He was to be taken out, that's my view. So that's that summary. Any thoughts on that or comments?
Would you like me to play the Scoggins video, Gavin? Or,
yeah, look, that'd be good.
Would you prefer to take questions here on that? I mean, obviously, there's some big reveals there that so far, planted witnesses, the stage scene that I alluded to when I went through the diagrammatic to the east. David Ward, if you remember, I walked you down there when we were in Dallas in November.
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Remember, David, it's exactly 5 minutes walk from 10th and Patton to Slaying to that scene where the barber shop is and the garage, the repair shop is, and the cafe area. So
just if I could, Neil, just before you play that, there's just one last thing, if I could. I just mentioned that Thomas Buchanan book, but I forgot to mention something very important. Jack Ruby told his psychologist, and I put that in the article, I think it was 6 months before he died or something or other. He recommends, if you want to know about the JFK assassination, etc., read Thomas Buchanan's book. So Jack Ruby told his psychologist, and it's in the media, in articles and newspapers in the 1970s, I quoted him, saying, read Buchanan's book. Now, Buchanan's book is about the Dallas police. It's one of the first books that ever mentioned the military-industrial complex. It talks big oil, talks big business, who's running the town, the right wing, the Minutemen, all sorts of stuff. But he's clearly talking in that book about an aggressive confrontation between Tippit and Oswald, and that Tippit was to make it look real good, that he had to make it look like Tippit was acting in self-defense when he shot Oswald. That's what's in the book, and I'm talking May 64. The Warren Commission hasn't even come out. Buchanan went and spoke with Nicholas Katzenbach, it appears, and also one of the Warren Commission staff lawyers, Willans. So just some interesting, insights from Mr. Ruby.
Gavin, hi there. Just a quick question. According to Laverne, what time did this happen at?
Sorry, what time?
Yeah. According to Laverne, what time did this happen at?
The actual interception?
Interception and killing, yes.
Yeah, no, she never had a time. So I don't think I've got a time in there. I haven't read the thing for quite a while, but I don't think it was any time. There were some things that they didn't have, and she was good. She just didn't sort of make something up. If she didn't know, she didn't know.
No, I appreciate that. It's just obviously because Helen Markham herself states that the shooting occurred around 106. Now, that would rule Oswald out completely just because of the fact that he was seen outside of his rooming house just a little after 1 o'clock. So it would certainly rule Oswald out of the killing if it was actually at 106, as Helen Markham stated on numerous occasions.
Yeah, we've got numerous people saying different times. We've got Bowley, I think 110, which would probably put it a little bit before then. I don't think everybody's watches are synchronized. I actually have always found it quite interesting how we come up with the timing at Beckley being precise to the minute. So I'm going, really? I don't know about you, but I don't wander around knowing 3 minutes past 1 something happens. But anyway, I hear what you're saying, Johnny, but I'm sort of looking at this information here and saying I think it's trumping a lot of other information that we may have in some of the detail that we have in some of the other information.
So would you think then, if Markham's estimate is correct of 106, it would rule Oswald out?
I'm not going to go into hypotheticals because you're talking times that we don't know the fact of what time we've really got. What I'm looking at is that the shooting is earlier than what is in the official record, and that starts to come out when you get into the radio calls. But as precisely the time, no, can't help you.
I have a comment on Bowley. He said that he arrived on the scene and looked at his watch. Now, he sounds like a man who looks at his watch quite a lot, because what he did before he arrived at that point, he went to pick up his daughter at school, and I can't remember the exact time in his affidavit, but he stated a precise time for picking her up. So I have a feeling that he regulated his life by the clock fairly accurately, because when the school came out, that was a known exact time that the children would be coming out and he could pick her up. So I think that his watch was accurate and he reported it accurately, and that he kept his watch closely on the right time.
And didn't Craig, sorry.
He could well do. Sorry.
No, my fault. I shouldn't have paid in there. Sorry. And didn't Craig also confirm the time of 106? And you'd assume a police officer would, I don't know. Did he not? Am I wrong?
He did, Stuart. He did, but there is some question marks on that one.
Okay.
He was in the
TSPD, yeah.
TSPD at the time. I mean, there is other evidence that suggests it's earlier than obviously 116. Shirley Martin interviewed Hugh Ainsworth, and you know he admitted 105, 106. We've obviously got the Helen Markham as well. But I mean, it's a little. I understand where Johnny's going with this, but and I just saw that Alan has just put something in the chat. I mean, we don't know we don't know how Oswald got to Oak Cliff, whether it was a combination of buses and taxis or whether it was a Rambler or whatever. I will refer you to Brooks's work that he did, and he made a presentation which is uploaded on our YouTube channel, which does suggest that, you know, Oswald could have been taken by taxi and dropped off at the Nietzsche's Zhang Beckley intersection, and that could have been much earlier, and Erling Roberts' time could be wrong, and it is possible that he was picked up by a police car. So there is I mean, this is all speculation to some extent, but I do think Brooks's work is quite good, and of course, if he was dropped off there, then he could easily get to that 10th pattern and Marsalis Denver area to come from the west. If he was dropped off at 500th block or 700th block of Beckley and went south, because that's what Whaley said, that he went in front of the cab and went south, again he could get there at an earlier time. So it's a little bit conjecture here, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because Mrs. Higgins also told Barry Ernest it was around 106 as well. So yeah, I think Larry Harris Larry Harris estimated the time of the killing was, I think it was around 109, maybe 108. But it's just interesting because obviously Markham stated in numerous interviews I've seen of her that the killing transpired around 106, which, if we take the official line that Oswald went back to 10:26, that would rule Oswald out automatically.
It would, but I'm just saying that there are other scenarios that can pan out here. I mean, I absolutely agree with Mike. I think 110 is set in stone of all of the. Well, I think the trouble is obviously Gavin has raised issues about Helen Markham's presence there anyway. However, if in the ordinary course of going to get her bus, she would have been there around about 106, 107, and she looked at the clock on the laundrette, in her apartment block, the utility room in the apartment block.
That's right. And when Bowley said he looked at his watch and it said 110, the shooting had already taken place, and he arrived on the scene afterwards when people were beginning to mill around and come to the location. So it would have happened before that.
Absolutely. So I think it's safe to say our constraints are something like 105.6 to 110 at the 109/110, probably around 108.
I think it's hard to take what Helen Markham says, really. I mean, when you read what she actually said when she was questioned, I mean, it was almost funny, wasn't it? They had to tell her that it was number 2. When you read the manuscript.
Well, yeah. So Markham said during her testimony that she didn't know anybody in the lineup. Yeah, but to be honest, Markham was sedated. She was sedated, to be fair, and she should never have been taken to a lineup under such conditions. But anyway, listen, I was just asking Gavin a question about the time. I'm sorry to interrupt your presentation.
That's all right, no worry. But I think Gavin can probably address some of the issues about Helen Markham anyway later. Gavin, would you like me to play the Scoggins thing?
Yeah, look, that'd be good. Just on the point of the timings, you do need to be careful planning a flag on a particular time and then building your entire think tank around that. That's a trap, and you can end up thinking logically you're heading in a certain path, and it may not be accurate. I don't put an enormous amount of weight in these minutes. We don't really have clarity around Oswald Roberts. As Neil just pointed out, if Nietzsche's is there, he's there earlier. But anyway, I just think I'm looking at the information that's fairly solid to be corroborated, as we'll see very soon. And if you want to ignore that to hop onto a time and say it can't have happened, then so be it.
Yeah,
well, Butch Burroughs, although it did come out later, Burroughs also places Oswald at the Texas Theatre at 107.
Yeah. If I was looking at Butch going to court, I'd have a real problem with his credibility. He's very fragile. I don't know if you've seen the interviews where he's done them as an older man, but he's when Brewer came into the building, Brewer actually led him around. He's not a very confident man. As he said in his testimony, he failed the mental part of the application to be in the army. I don't sing and dance on the 5 minutes past 1 scenario that he's come up with. I think Oswald's there earlier, but I'm not going to be lined up saying that's it. It's 5 past 1. That's it. All over.
With all due respect, if we're talking about someone's credibility, then Helen Markham certainly in the dirt. I mean, Joseph Ball called her an utter screwball, and she claimed that she was talking to Officer Tippit alone for 20 minutes as he after he was shot. So listen to that. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, Johnny, that's fine. I fully appreciate it if you want to bring up all those particular points. Have you read the article I wrote?
I did. I read it in Garrison. Yes, I bought it.
Do you understand if somebody's threatened and controlled, what they will do and what they won't do?
Oh, certainly. I also read the Fieldman article where Vince Solandra and Harold Feldman and Marguerite Oswald went to speak to Markham as well in 1964. I understand that completely. But yeah, there's just because obviously you mentioned about Butch Burroughs' credibility.
Landria and Feldman just completely confirm they're under threat. Have you been threatened? Yes. Please leave. 2 police cars just visited the area. So you've got to put all this in context. You have to have a holistic look, not just picking out some detail and saying, I hang my hat on that.
Oh, no, but I'm just saying that obviously if there's a question over Butch Burroughs' credibility, then there's certainly a question over Helen Markham's. Helen Markham would have been an absolute disaster of a witness for the prosecution if Oswald had stood trial. I don't think there's any question over Markham's credibility in this case.
I mean, Johnny, again, wrapped up with this whole Oak Cliff shenanigans thing, there's a question over the testimony from Bledsoe, from Whaley, from McWaters. I mean, it really is, you know, a shit show if you go back and read those testimonies.
No, completely, mate, 100%.
You know, I mean, you know, Whaley, who obviously was killed in that crash on the Houston Viaduct, which is, you know, almost unprecedented. But I mean, if you go and look at his statements, we start off with Nietzsche's, then we go to 500 block, then we go to 700 block. I mean, it's totally inconsistent, you know, what he's saying. McWaters' testimony is almost impossible to understand, particularly with respect to the bus transfer, doesn't make any sense. And Bledsoe, I mean, she had to be chaperoned through her testimony by a female counsel.
Yeah, we all know.
Yeah, so you know, I mean, it really makes it very difficult. And you know, I'm going to just throw something else into the mix. I do think that Bowley's testimony and his timing is likely to be very accurate. But you know, Bowley worked for Jack Ruby as well. I don't know if you know that. So you know, there is another connection there just to throw into the mix. So I'm just going to grab the screen again now, Gavin, and run
Okay.
your thing. Just bear with me a second, please. Right, how do I do this? Gavin, when I play it, please confirm that it's running okay.
Yep.
Okay. Today is Thursday, 22nd February 2024, 10 o'clock in the morning in Brisbane. My name is Gavan McMahon, and I'm joined here today by Ken Scoggin from Texas. How you doing, Ken?
I'm doing great, Gavin.
And of course, it's Wednesday night there. It's not Thursday.
Yep.
We are doing this interview today to talk about the shooting of Dallas Police Officer J.D.Tippit. The shooting occurred at 10th Street, Bay Cliff, Dallas, on the afternoon of November 22nd, 1963. The shooting occurred about 40 minutes after the assassination of President Kennedy. Lee Oswald, of course, was arrested for the shooting murder of Officer Tippit, and he was charged subsequently with the assassination of President Kennedy. He, of course, as we know, was shot and killed 2 days later by Jack Ruby in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Ken's joining us here today because Ken's got a story to tell. Ken is grandson of William Scoggin, who was a witness at the shooting of Officer Tippit on the afternoon over in Oak Cliff in Dallas. William Scoggins was interviewed by the Dallas Police, by the FBI, Secret Service, and of course he testified to the Warren Commission.
How are you getting on there, bud? What are you looking at?
I've been communicating for several months, back late 2023, and we started talking.
Oh, is that what that was?
Ken. And Ken's got some new information to share with us. And it's much appreciated, Ken, that you talked to us today. This new information is very well that his grandfather, William Scoggins, was planted or prepared, pre-arranged witness at the Tippit scene. So what this means is that Lee Harvey Oswald was intercepted at Kent Street, Oakcliffe, in a pre-planned clandestine operation. That operation involves the Dallas police, involves Jack Ruby, involves the mob, and it involves pre-planted, pre-prepared witnesses at the Tippit scene. This new information, of course, does conflict with the testimony that William gave to the Warren Commission, which was fairly basic information. And of course, what it meant was that this new information is clearly suggesting that Officer Tippit just didn't happen to come across Oswald in the suburb of Dallas by chance. It was pre-arranged and prepared operation by Dallas police with associates. In addition to this interview today, Ken and I have been in discussions, as I said, and I've prepared a 14-page document, which, if I could, Ken, I just get you to go on record to endorse that I sent you that 14-page PDF document back on 11th of February, and that you replied basically confirming the content as it relates to what your family has revealed to you, that information is correct. And you're okay with that? Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just briefly, what William Scoggin's testimony was very basic when compared to other testimonies. I'll just briefly run through it so people that are listening to this interview are aware. William was 49 years of age at the time. He's parked his cab on the southeast corner of Patton and 10th, facing north. He's eating his lunch. He watched as Officer Tippit's coming from the west towards the east. He pulled up the sidewalk. Then there was a man come over to the police car. The man was facing west. He saw Officer Tippit get out of the police car. He heard some shots, and he saw Officer Tippit fall. He then got out of his cab. He said that he crouched next to the cab and watched as the man came towards him, but through the bushes. And then he watched this man head south down on the Patton Avenue. He rang his dispatch taxi company, reported it. He then was interviewed by authorities, but he didn't actually go down to the police to a lineup where he picked out Oswald until the next day, which was interesting. We're going to get to some questions in a minute, Ken, but I thought it'd be just interesting or just good to explain to the folks that the background to how you become aware of this information was, again, pretty well guarded in a fairly closely guarded family secret. Really, in the late 70s, William, who was about 65 years of age at that time, told your father, his son, Calvin, the story of what happened. And the focus of that communication was more, seemed to be around the how it came to be that he was there, more than the content of what he observed that day, but we'll touch on that. And then around 2005, your father, Calvin, which is 25 years after William told him, Calvin is then talking to you and relaying the information of what his dad had told him. Your father died only a couple of years after that. Is that pretty well your recollection of the
yes,
information? Sir. Do you remember how your dad said how he spoke to Papa, how he spoke to his William, about how that came about?
I'm not sure. Not sure how it really came about. It's just that they didn't really talk much, and I'm not sure how my dad and him got started talking on it. I think it was just my dad's curiosity.
Yeah.
Because he was never really interested in it, my father.
Yeah.
And so I really can't say how they exactly started talking, but I do know that when my father and I were talking, I just asked him about that because, you know, I had mentioned to you that I had thought that my grandfather was the cab driver who drove Oswald
Yes.
from the bus deal. But I had saw, you know, from the bus station to Oak Cliff, but I had saw a program, and it said that my grandfather was the cab driver that saw Oswald shoot Tippit. And I had mentioned something to my father, and he had told me that Papa had told him. And he didn't really come out and tell him all the details. He just kind of glossed over.
Yeah.
But, you know, my father wasn't that, you know, into it. So.
Yeah. So did you approach your father, or did your father approach you to tell you what you had said?
Well, my father had come over to watch the Super Bowl. This was gosh, I think it was the Indianapolis Colts playing the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
And we were sitting around talking, and I brought it up, and you know, that's when he kind of indulged what he knew,
Right.
and what Papa had told.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some of the detail here. Obviously, it's pretty important and revealing information. Did your grandfather, William Scoggins, know Jack Ruby?
Well, he knew him not personally as like a close friend, but he knew him kind of as a business associate, because my grandfather was a taxi driver, and of course he would take some of his rides to the club, and he had a setup with Ruby. Ruby offered him that if you're picking up a businessman from the airport, they want to know recommendations for a club. Well, it was kind of like a finder's fee.
Yeah. And
so that's pretty much how he knew Ruby. So he would get, you know, I don't know how much stipend, you know, for bringing customers to the club.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Did William know many of the Dallas police?
I think I don't think he knew any of them personally, but he knew, you know, just from being around, you know, town. I don't think he knew any of them personally.
Yeah. What about Officer Tippit? Did you know Officer Tippit?
I can't say.
Okay. And what about, you made a comment to me about how William viewed the police and the underworld. Did you relay that?
Yes. It was a well-known fact that there was factions in the Dallas police that were corrupt and would kind of look the other way, probably for favors, to look the other way on unsavory acts, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like simple crimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were, it was a known fact back then.
Yeah, yeah. So can you just tell us, sort of in your own words, how it is that William happened to be there at 10th and Patton on the afternoon of the 22nd of November?
Okay, so my father told me that my grandfather was contacted, and I'm not sure how he was contacted the day before, that from a guy that was an associate of Ruby, that they wanted him to be at that position, Patton and 10th Street. And I don't know if it was at an exact time or particular time,
yeah,
but it was around 1:30, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Because my grandfather always had lunch at home, but on this particular day, he took his lunch with him and he went to that spot to have his lunch after he had taken a fare he had picked up from I believe it was the airport, and he dropped him off and then made his way over there, got him a Coke, and then went to go eat his lunch. But he didn't know why he was supposed to be there. But the guy told him that he will figure it out. So
Okay, so he kind of knew not to ask, I think was the term you used with me once before.
pardon me.
I think you said he knew not to ask.
Correct. Yeah. It was like unspoken that, you know, I think my grandfather knew that Ruby was part of the, you know, the Dallas mob. I don't think he thought he was the head of it, but I'm pretty sure he knew that he had connections and that he didn't really want to cross these people. So
Yeah, you get along with things as you're required to. Can you tell us a little bit about this man that recruited William? Anything else that you can tell us about who he was with or where he was working or anything?
I just know that my father said that he was just an associate of Ruby's. I don't know if he worked at the club or if he was a business partner or what. But yeah, I really can't say on that.
Yeah, okay. When we did talk there a few weeks back, you kind of mentioned a couple of words, and we did confirm that these weren't words that were things that you were sure of, but possibly an assistant or a gopher.
Yes. Yeah, you know, it was I don't know, the way my dad described it, I mean, he was like an associate, like he did things for Ruby, errands, and, you know, like I said, a gopher.
Okay. What can you tell us about what William said he saw at 10th Street in the afternoon?
That he was eating his lunch. I guess he heard the gunshots. He got out of the car. He saw Oswald or somebody running toward him. So he ducked beside the car. And then he saw, before when he heard the gunshots, he said he saw the guy running toward him and somebody else running the other way. But when he was coming toward him, he ducked down beside the cab because he didn't want that person to commandeer his cab.
Yeah, okay. He didn't really talk much about the other people at the scene. He really only just talked about Oswald coming towards him.
Yes.
Now, was William threatened?
Well, he wasn't. Dad said that he wasn't outright threatened. What Dad said, the feeling he got was that it was kind of an unspoken that, you know, you don't talk about it. My grandfather wasn't very much a talker. I mean, my relationship with him, he was very reserved person. And you would pretty much have to pry any information out of him. So
yeah. You mentioned that you thought you heard your father say that if he told what happened, he would disappear. Is that correct?
Well, yes. That it was pretty much that was the feeling, I guess, that he got, that he was told not to speak of it, that he would disappear.
Yeah. And did you get a sense that when William gave his testimony that he was following a script, or at least only saying part of what occurred that day?
I really can't say.
Okay. And did you think that William might have been rewarded in some way? Did your father talk about that?
Well, I do know that it was kind of odd that shortly thereafter, you know, being a cab driver, you know, I didn't know his previous, but he got a really great job at, I don't know if it was General Dynamics or one of the airplane defense contractor companies. I'm not. So I just know that it was, you know, kind of odd. So,
Yeah. And I mentioned a lot of names to you over our discussions over the last few months about people from the Carousel Club, associates of Ruby, Dallas police officers, some of the strippers, a whole range of names, but none of those were names that you can recall being mentioned at all.
no.
All right. Look, that's the bulk of the questions. And I just thought that it was such an interesting, you know, revelation that you've got, that we're able to put it on tape, put it on official record so people can, you know, hear this information. You haven't spoken to other researchers at all?
No, sir. I haven't talked to anybody. So
Yeah. And was there sort of a reason why you sort of haven't really spoken up till now?
well, I guess I'm the only one that I know that's really into the JFK, but I haven't really done any deep research. I didn't really think that the information was, you know, that my grandfather was a key figure. I just thought it was, you know, I don't know. I didn't think it was significant.
Yeah. It's much appreciated, Ken. And just, I'll just finish up here, but just sort of mention that back in November, I published an article in Garrison, the Journal of History and Deep Politics, issue 15, which was an article that also talked about paid planted witness Helen Markham. And here we are now talking about another planted witness scene, William Scoggin, which of course leads me to believe that there's there's more. But I just wanted to pass on my thanks to you, Ken, for joining me today and putting this on record.
Yes, sir. I hope I can help add something to this mystery that's gone on way too long.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ken.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Okay, Gavin, you still there?
Yeah, that's good, Neil.
Yeah, it came across very well. I don't know if you heard it, everybody, well, but it's certainly good here.
Well, look, just a couple of observations, and as was mentioned in there, I've got a document I've put together which I ran past Ken, and he's endorsed it. So there's a bit more information in there, but the crux of it you've got. And it just was interesting looking at some of the similarities between Markham and Scoggins. Of course, their testimony, they don't mention the second person, the second man. They're both Oak Cliff locals. They both know Ruby, who's a Oak Cliff local. They're sort of both acting out roles, even though Scoggins is technically driving his cab that day. He was there waiting for this event. They both were in work clothes. They were both threatened. They were both rewarded. They both kept quiet. And now we've got both families kind of revealing some important information. It then begs the question about other planted witnesses. And as I said earlier, this came about after I'd finished my article. And in that article, if you look at it, you'll see that I stated in there that Helen Markham said there were other planted witnesses at the scene. The Markham family didn't know who that was. but I've had that actually in the article. Markham is saying there's other planted witnesses. Well, London to a brick, there's more than two. And we can speculate who that might be. It may be some people who we already have named, as in a Bowley and a Benavides and the Davis girls. But it could also be people completely unknown who just disappeared off the scene very quickly. But I think it was just sort of interesting. And again, it helped for me to corroborate what I was hearing from the Markham family. It's standing up pretty well when I'm hearing this. The Scoggins people, or William Scoggins, clearly had a direct understanding of the implications for him and his family, because he said nothing, and the way Ken summed it up, he really only spoke about it to his son Calvin after he'd retired, which means he's finished that good paying gig. I think Ken described it as a cushy gig. If you look at his Warren Commission testimony, he talks about working at General Dynamics, and all of a sudden he's a cab driver for 2 years. So I don't know what he was doing at General Dynamics, but it looks like they've placed him back there. But it was a well-paid job. It was not. It was above what you would have expected. So yeah, some interesting insights into the Scoggins side of things. So if anybody's got any comments.
Yeah, well, I thought it was a good interview, Gavin. I mean, a couple of things. I mean, obviously, McBride in his book talked about 10 of the 20 witnesses, known to Ruby. And you mentioned earlier on, I think in part 1 before we froze, that McBride didn't develop this area to the level that he may have been able to develop it. I thought what was quite striking was the fact that he said that he normally had lunch at home, and this was definitely an anomaly to have lunch at the corner of 10th and Patton. And obviously the other thing that came out of that was, two men running off in different directions, which obviously we've heard from Aquila Clemens before. And I think finally you were trying to press him on, who was this associate, and you told him to be there, and you mentioned the word gopher. Obviously Larry Crayford springs to mind there.
Yeah, I mean, in that article I put together, which I'll send to you, Neil, I mean, you've got, I think his name's Andrew Armstrong, who was the acting assistant manager, or the assistant manager. You had the MC had just moved on. I'm just trying to think of his Shari Angel's husband, Wally Weston. So he'd moved on, and there was another MC there. You've obviously got Larry Crayford, who sort of would look like a more likely candidate. But I think, as Ken said, there's others here we don't know, because it wasn't really clear where this person was. Was he an employee of the Carousel or someone who did stuff for Ruby? And I wouldn't discount Mr. Bowley. You mentioned earlier about he used to work for him as a doorman at the Vegas. Well, it was a bit more than that. He was invested into the nightclub scene back in the day, in the 50s. And guess who bailed him out? Ruby and Associates. So there's a bit of a history there that goes back. But look, we may not know. Interestingly, Ken and I haven't finished on that. He has got some friends and some relatives, and we're actually just exploring a little bit more. So we'll see what that brings.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions on this section?
Didn't Larry Crayford have in his notebook the phone number of the Davis sisters?
Yes.
Which is extremely weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, Larry Crayford's an interesting character. I mean, everybody looks at Larry Crayford and he's a shooter, he's this and that, whatever. I don't discount he was a possible second Patsy.
Gavin, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
If Scoggins was a planted witness, why do you think he didn't park in a position that he could have viewed the whole Oswald arrest / Tippit killing? Because of course he's parked round the corner and there's a hedge in his way. So why didn't he park on 10th itself so he could have an unobstructed view of the whole arrest?
Again, Johnny, I think you're spot on. But what we've got to be careful here is that we accept he's sitting in his cab. I don't accept he's sitting in his cab. That's what he testified to. We don't know whether he's standing outside the cab. We know with his statements, his affidavits, we call them statements, that I think the one that he gave early on might have been to the Secret Service. He actually got out of the cab and went across the road. He went west across Patton and waited till the man, Oswald, went down south on Patton before he came back to his cab. That's not what he says in subsequent FBI documents and, of course, in his testimony. So we really don't know where he was. He's put the car there. Again, when Ken said it was being relayed, what Calvin, his father, was telling him that his dad had told him, Calvin wasn't like totally sure, was he just repeating what he said in his testimony? Like he didn't really add much to that. But Calvin didn't have a real interest in this thing. And it was, fortunately, he did pass it on to Ken in good time. But it's a good question, but I don't think we can just be sure exactly where he was. And was he told, according to Ken, he was told park? Was he told precisely that location? I don't know.
Hi, Gavin.
I asked Ken a few things like, well, if he was to be there, he had to be there pretty early because he can't just take pot luck that there's not already cars parked there. Where does he go then? I did say to Ken, I said, Ken, if your papa is being used for this particular little job and he's flicked some money as a bit of a kicker, whatever, and he's used to doing that with Ruby, we've got to sort of then try and work out, has he been doing other things for them before? Because it's a pretty trusted role. If you're setting this thing up and you're putting plan of witnesses in, you want to make sure they don't dilly-dally and get a cab ride way over the north side of Dallas and can't get back in time. So I think there would have been more to the planning to make sure he didn't miss it. I don't think he'd want to be telling his recruiters that he missed the appointment.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi, Gavin.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. You're talking about people being planted there. So surely the guy that was closest to it in the truck would have been a plant as well, wouldn't he? And he actually said it was Oswald, didn't he? So I mean, he looks like a pretty good suspect. What was his name? Benavides?
Yeah, in the article, I spent a long time on him. I actually kicking myself loaded. I probably spent too much time, but it just got me going. The more you're opening documents and seeing where was this going. I mean, at the end of the day, Lavelle's document says that Benavides did an affidavit. Well, where is it? There's a hell of a lot of stuff in Benavides that does not compute. But I think a real kicker is Sam Ginyard. When Bellin says to him, were you there when Benavides rocked up in the truck? Yes, sir. Go figure that out. So Benavides, as far as I'm concerned, yes. Now, I put in the article what Brownlow and co were saying, which has got nothing to do with what the Markham people are saying. He was trying to link Domingo's brother to this whole thing. That's Brownlow's business.
His brother got shot, didn't he?
Yeah, I think it wasn't until about 65 or something. So it was after the Warren Commission, but it may well have been if he had some involvement with Ruby and others that he was a risk. Who knows?
His brother was mistaken for him.
Yeah, well, that's what the family believed, and the father did try to make some inquiries and got threatened himself.
Yeah, yeah.
Paul, Benavides didn't say it was Oswald.
I thought he did.
He said he couldn't identify the shooter, hence why apparently he wasn't taken to a lineup.
I thought I thought on the I don't know whether it's the men who killed Kennedy, but I'm sure 100% certain I've seen it on film where he's been interviewed, and he sort of said it was Oswald.
Yeah, this came out years later.
Was it in the 80s? I don't know.
It wasn't the man who killed Kennedy. It did come out years later it came out years later that he reversed himself from. He testified that he was down on the floor of his truck for a couple of minutes, and then he reversed himself to be a couple of seconds. But sure, that's why Benavides was not taken to a lineup, because he said he couldn't identify the shooter.
I'm sure I've seen a clip actually very close to 1963 where he's actually where he's actually said that he sort of like sworn it was Oswald. But I mean, I'll have to look into it again. I'm convinced I've seen it somewhere.
Yeah. If you find it, please post it to the group. But
yeah,
that's why he wasn't taken to a lineup, because he says he couldn't identify the shooter.
Yeah.
I think Lavelle says some interesting things about Benavides when Lavelle was being questioned, where he says something about, I don't think we took an affidavit from him. Might have. He did or he didn't. And then when he says something later on about, he says that Benavides couldn't identify the man, and then Bellin points out that he could, because obviously Lavelle hadn't been told for Benavides what he'd given in his testimony. And then Lavelle says, oh, maybe he couldn't identify him, as opposed to didn't see him. So it's like, it's an absolute.
If I recall, Paul, there was a question mark with respect to Benavides' description of Oswald's haircut, the back of his haircut, whether it was tapered or just straight across the back.
Yeah.
That was an inconsistency with the actual haircut.
Yeah, because he was the closest, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he is literally 15 feet across the road.
Yeah.
If you've been to the scene, it is just literally, diagonally across from where Tippit fell.
If he's there, he's the closest.
Sorry?
If he's there, he's the closest.
No, that's the big question.
Well, obviously Benavides is an important witness because he is a link in the custody chain of the shells, which was pointed out to Poe. So he's a very important witness, is Domingo Benavides. Also, of course, Ted Calloway asks Benavides which way the shooter went.
Yeah.
Well, of course, which is very important as well.
Well, look, we might move on, Neil. I'm just looking at the clock here and thinking we've got a long way to go, so I might have to move through some of these.
Wow.
Look, just quickly to basically point out what Markham is saying she sees at the scene, and then what we're going to do is just unpack some of these items in their own right a little bit further on. But we've got Oswald walking west, a conversation between Oswald and Tippit, a second police car facing north in the driveway between 404, 410 and two policemen. A man comes out from this area. He just appeared, stood behind Oswald. There's no conversation, apparently 18 years of age. Tippit gets out of the car to the front. There's a scuffle with Oswald. Oswald shoots. Markham thought Tippit fired the gun. The gun was under the body. The Italian man had a gun, but she didn't think he fired. Doesn't mean he didn't, but she didn't think he did. The Italian man westbound and then southwest across the vacant lot. Oswald westbound, south on Patton. The older policeman, we don't really have an age, but there's an age difference between the two policemen. The older of the two came out to Tippit. The younger policeman stayed at the car. Notebook and radio were handy. Neither of the police responded to Oswald or the other man. The two police reversed eventually the car out of the driveway into the alley. They were then some of the first to arrive back at the scene. And the younger one went after Oswald or the Italian man, as I'm referring to. And according to Markham, the wallet was introduced by the younger of the two police officers, supposedly off the ground. And the important part is that Markham was saying that she told this to the policeman at the time, but she was shut down very quickly by the authorities. And that stayed the way all the way through, where she was eventually guided and scripted and coached in her testimony. We know how well that went. So that's the information. So just to sort of unpack a couple of these things, one of them was, where was Helen Markham standing? Now, according to the family, they're telling me that she was closer. She wasn't at that, whatever it is, what is it, the north west corner of 10th and Patton. She was actually east of that. We don't know where. Virginia Davis in her testimony just sort of mentioned something very quickly about near the big tree. Neil's pulled up a couple of photos. There are a couple of big trees. Certainly, if she's at that corner, she's supposed to be the official corner she's at. There's no big tree there. Frank Semino, in his testimony, or his affidavit, comes out and says pretty clearly the time he came out, there was somebody dressed in, I think he called it a nurse's uniform or something, already there in front of his place. He's at the second house, I think, on the corner. And Sergeant Croy, if you look at his testimony after they talked to him about the basement, if you look at what he's talking about with conversation with the lady watering the lawn or whatever, that sounds like Alan Markham. So that's that one. The gang, just quickly, that I didn't sort of mention one little point there, that a number of the gang included, I've got the names of the others, but Red Smith, who gets mentioned in dispatches, William Smith, who we mentioned before, that was on parole for car theft, Jimmy Burt, that basically these were members of the gang, and there were quite a number of others. Markham family is saying that Oswald is connected to the Oakcliff gang, but they're also saying that this second man who came out and stood behind Oswald was an Italian man, and he was from an Italian gang, Little Italy, West Dallas. Now, I don't know anything about that, and I haven't been able to find out anything. I've asked some people, but I'm drawing a blank, so if anybody can explore any of that. We probably could go, Neil, to the Ron Ryland video if it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share screen again and pick that up.
Just briefly, the Ron Ryland video is interesting because it's within a couple of hours of his returning back from the Oakcliff, Texas Theatre area. And he talks about a confrontation between two people. So just listen to what he says. I find it interesting.
This is the gentleman here again is Ron Ryland, one of our cameramen that we have some exclusive film to show you once again. Let's roll the film and we'll narrate it as we go. Ron, these are the police cars pulling into the area.
Once the report went out that this man was holed up in Oak Cliff, we all went out in the motorcade. This is the first building that he was reported in. It's an old junk shop of one kind or another. This is the jacket that the man was wearing. He discarded it as he ran down the street. An eyewitness here said that he had seen the man go into the building, and this is the rear of it. The officers converged on it once again.
Let's make a point here now. This is the film. It is a suspect.
This is a suspect, yes. They saw this man running in and out that answered the description of the original man. No, this is an eyewitness, Jay. The man that is being interrogated here said he saw the man run down the street. Of course, everywhere we went, the crowds converged and hampered operations quite a bit. This is the scene where the police officer was shot. The car that you see in the background there belonged to the police officer, and this woman said that she had seen a man answering the description of the man that was later captured, run up, stop the officer, and then shoot him. About that time, another report came in that there was a man had walked into the Texas Theater further down the block with a shotgun over his arm. Of course, everybody broke and ran down into the area at the time. This gun that you see in the background here in this officer's hand is the one that allegedly was used to shoot the police officer. This is the officer's billfold that was found lying on the ground right alongside of the car. The crime investigators here are fingerprinting the car in hopes that they could possibly lift a print to use. Now we're inside of the Texas Theater. Of course, everything is black. The movie is going on. Police suddenly jumped this man and started to drag him out of the theater, hustled him out to the car as the crowd broke and started to maul the police officers and grab this man, trying to run with him. They shouted murder and just almost anything to try and get at this man. As you see here, the officers hustled him into the car and ran away just as fast as they could from this Texas Theater in hopes of protecting this man, and they have taken him off to an unknown spot. We don't know where they're holding him for the interrogation. Once again, these are exclusive films. We were the only photographers at the scene, Mr. Watson.
That's good, Neil.
Okay.
Yes, so the important part that got my attention when he says that, and he's an eyewitness himself. He's listening to all these people talking at the scene, and he's hearing Markham say that the man that they later identified at the Texas Theatre ran up, stopped the officer, and shot him. So ran up is not a casual walk, casual standing by the footpath, talking through the window of the car. Run up, stop the officer. Well, I don't know how you stop the officer without being physical, and shot him. So I think that's fairly important that we haven't got too much in the way of eyewitness testimony, but that's pretty good. A couple of hours after the event. The interesting thing too, Thomas Buchanan, as I said, he mentions this in his May book about the aggressive confrontation. He talks about Tippit lunging at Oswald. So that's just some information that may provide some sort of corroboration for the fact that Helen Markham's talking about there being a scuffle, which we've never heard before. Neil, if we could go to the Murray Jackson video, which relates to the disturbance. Just quickly on the Murray Jackson video, just before you play it, Neil. I'll go through it afterwards, but if you can just listen out when Murray Jackson says that he tried calling Officer Tippit because he was trying to keep track of him in his mind, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you then listen, he then talks about this call sheet that comes in about a disturbance. And I called Officer Tippit, but didn't get him. So he's called him again. And we'll come back to that, but just keep your eyes open, ears open for that one when it comes up.
Why was Officer Tippit in Oak Cliff off his normal beat? Those who believe there was a conspiracy involving the Dallas police force have maintained that the meeting between Oswald and Tippit was not an accident, that Tippit may have been looking for Oswald or vice versa. They say Tippit should not have been where he was and should not have been alone in the squad car. Eddie Barker talked to police radio dispatcher Murray Jackson.
Officer Jackson, a lot of critics of the Warren report have made quite a thing out of the fact that Officer Tippit was not in his district when he was killed. Could you tell us how he happened to be out of his district? Yes, Eddie, I have heard this several times since the incident occurred, and he was where he was because I had assigned him to be where he was in the central Oak Cliff area. There was the shooting involving the president, and we immediately dispatched every available unit to the triple underpass where the shot was reported to have come from. I realized that, as you said, that we were draining the Oak Cliff area of available police officers, so if there was an emergency such as an armed robbery or a major accident to come up, we wouldn't have anybody there that would be in close proximity to answer the call. And since JD was the outermost unit, actually I had two units, 87, which was Officer Nelson, and 78, which was Officer Tippit. Well, now, as you got down toward the time when Officer Tippit met his death, what transpired right prior to that? Were you aware of where he was all the time?
No, I asked him once again what his location was sometime after, and to determine that he was in the Oak Cliff area. He said he was at Lancaster and 8th, which is on the east side of Oak Cliff, but in the main business district. And I did ask once again a few minutes later I called him to ask him his location so I could keep track of him where he was in my mind, but he didn't answer.
When did you realize that he was dead?
We had received a call from a citizen. They called us in on the telephone, and the call sheet came to me. And it was a disturbance in the street in the 400 block of East 10th. And I had called, I said 78, and he didn't answer. And almost immediately to this, a citizen came in on police radio and said, send me some help, there's been an officer shot out here. And knowing that JD was the only one that should have been in Oak Cliff, my reaction was to call 78. And of course, JD didn't answer. So we asked the citizen to look at the number on the side of the car. This was the equipment number that determined which patrol car was to be on each assigned district. And they said that it was number 10. And since I had worked with JD in this particular car, well, I determined to myself that with him not answering and the equipment number that this was Officer Tippit?
The answer to this question is that he had been sent to Oak Cliff by the police dispatcher.
Okay, Gavin.
Thanks, Neil. So what I've tried to do is, and I'll just do a very brief summary here, is tried to sort of overlay what the Markham information is in relation to what's been observed, and obviously the Scoggins information. When you look at the radio tapes and the transcripts, it's a quagmire. Certainly, a lot of researchers back in the day and more recently, Mar Lane, Ben Jones, Larry Harris. There's a whole lot of people who've talked about the interference that's occurred with these tapes and the transcripts. You may or may not be aware there was 3 submissions to the Warren Commission on transcripts, and there are some audios you can get around the place. The 3 transcripts, the Sawyer and the 705 and 1974, and each one kind of added, but very oddly, things were changing as the new ones were being submitted. There's times have changed, I think. Words have been changed. There's deletions, there's additions, and big slabs, I think, of conversations are just being shifted and plonked in place. Just going back to what we know from some of these logs, and we think these ones are okay. You got the 12:45 call that Jackson just referred to. 9 minutes later, the 12:54 call. And then we've got a 103 call, which is the one that he's talking about, keeping track of it in his mind. And those ones are in the transcripts. You can see them there. In the earlier transcripts, the second one, the WC 705, there's actually 2 calls attributed after that to Tippit, and they're at 108. By the time the Warren Commission submission 1974 is submitted a couple of months later, it's no longer 78. It's 2 different numbers, and they have no idea who the officers are. That second call that you just heard Jackson talk about, where he said that he called Tippit about this disturbance, after the 103 call, it's not in the transcripts, it's not in the tapes. You can't hear it, and it's not written down anywhere. So the speculation that either the 103 or the subsequent call by Jackson is to alert Tippit of a disturbance at 10th of Marsalis. This is what I'm suggesting has probably occurred. The 2 108 calls by Tippit are a response to the Jackson call, and then later probably a second call saying that I'm stopping to talk to a suspect, and calls for a backup, the second police car. The scenario, therefore, lines up with the fact that we've got a disturbance up the road at 10th of Marsalis. Oswald's on foot, and then at 103 or thereabouts, Tippit's called, alerted, and then at 108, a couple of times it looks like Tippit responds. 108 could be he's responding, and next he's getting out of his car, calls for backup. No, we can speculate what was the conversation, but I think it does fit. And Johnny, those are the times that are in the log as to how accurate they are. I think they've left some of these things in here because they weren't sure how to unroll it later on. That's my view on it, why they're in there. The fact that the submission 1974 changes the number from 78, that in itself is quite interesting, because Jim Bowles is the sergeant in charge of the radio room. He gets promoted later on, captain or whatever. He was principally responsible for a lot of the second and third, or definitely the second submission to the Warren Commission on the tape transcripts. And he's adamant it's Tippit, 78. And he says he knows it's Tippit because he knows Tippit and he knows the voice. He said, I knew the 4 syllables, 78. I knew that the inflection and the tone of Tippit's voice. But go one further, he has a pretty good corroboration of that, and it's one person you wouldn't think of, Vincent Bugliosi. who's in New York and talking to him over the phone, and Bowles plays the tape, his tape that he just happened to have with him, over the phone, and Bugliosi confirms it's 78. So it is Tippit that's making that call. That's in the end notes for 4 days in November. So it's just sort of, to me, quite significant. When you look at the books we talked about earlier, McBride's book and Myers' book, McBride acknowledges this, talks about it, but he doesn't know where this all leads. If you look at the Myers book, you won't see any reference to it. Didn't happen. That's not Tippit, so therefore he's not making any reference to it. I think I'll go with the McBride version. There's one more strange, I felt very odd, and it's interesting to see what people think, but in the Warren Commission 705 submission at 1:23, so we're only talking a few minutes after their official time, there's a message goes out, pick up for investigation aggravated assault of police officer, which is really weird because they've already referred to it several times, including Kennedy, as the Signal 19, which is a shooting of a person. So it's a gunshot. And all of a sudden we're talking about an aggravated assault. So I really can't quite fathom that. But then by the time we get to the next submission, WC 1974, that conversation has morphed into wanted for investigation, assault to murder of a police officer. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know about a charge called assault to murder. I could hear somebody saying wanted for a range of charges from assault to murder. That's kind of the terminology I would have thought. So I just find that all very peculiar, that they're talking about assault. And we're only talking several minutes after the shooting. Well, Tippit hasn't been declared dead as far as I know. He's at the hospital. So they may have decided again to keep some reference in there. But again, how does a transcript change from, investigation, aggravated assault, and suddenly appears as wanted for investigation, assault to murder of a police officer? That's completely different words. Now, I get it. I've spoken to some people that have got a fair bit of background with all the tapes and everything. People are, it's a difficult thing to do, et cetera, et cetera. I just think that goes a little bit beyond just a misinterpretation of what somebody's saying. So I think the fact they keep using the word assault in there might reflect either the assault that occurred up at 10th and Marsalis or the assault on Tippit by Oswald. So that's that one.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. Do you want to play anything else, or?
The only, probably not to play anyone, but probably one that's worth a run is the second police car.
Yep. Okay, let's have a look at that.
There's no.
Then he got out of the car.
So, is it this one, the Markham interview?
No, Markham. The three Markham ones are literally. You can play that if you want, but we'll come back to the car. Markham just consistently keeps talking about going across the vacant lot.
Okay, well, the vacant lot is important in terms of the sites, but you want the Aquila Clemens one?
No, if you just hold on the tapes, I'll just touch on the second police car because it's probably more important than some of this other stuff. I get it. The second man, the Italian man, is important. I don't think he's anywhere near as important as the second police car.
Sure. Okay.
So we've got several people talking about the second police car. Mike Brownlow talks about Sam Ginyard, another African-American, telling him back in the day. The Davis girl, of course, Virginia, in her testimony, talks about other police being there when they came out, which is pretty well soon as Oswald's gone around the corner. McBride again touches on that. We've then got the Markham information now, talking about the second police car. And then we've got the Halland story. So I might just touch on the Halland story because it's, to me, quite significant. There was some articles done by Dale Myers some time ago, which he was trying to basically say that the story by Brownlow and Pulte, etc., was incorrect, couldn't have happened, and Miss Halland's not there. So I've spoken with Lad Halland quite a few times. And that article where I've got a paragraph there on the Halland story, is precisely, it's exactly Ladd approved that draft prior to me submitting it for publication. So he's endorsed every single word in that paragraph on the land. Neil, can I just grab a document that I've got in front of me here? How do I do that? Do I just go share screen and pull it up?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing. Just bear with me a second.
Okay.
Keep that. Stop share.
There
you go.
So I should be able to pull this up.
Yeah, you need to grab the screen.
Okay, can you see that or not? I don't know if you can.
Right, you've got to click on. You've got to click on the actual pane, P-A-N-E, on your screen.
No, look, it's okay. I'll read it out because it's in the article so people can see it. According to Ladd's sister, this is what her mother, Doris Land, told her. 1, she was on the 2nd floor. 2, she saw 2 men on a corner. 3, she was looking out a window and saw Oswald quite clearly. 4, he was running toward between the houses. A police car drove through the driveway. She told the police this and they told detectives she didn't think they passed it on to anyone else. She said it was like they didn't want Oswald caught. And that's an interview with Ladd. And I know who the sister is. It wasn't mentioned in the article that was put out because I don't think somebody was very keen on people finding her. The reason why this is also significant, and as I've put in the article, is that Ladd's sister told Ladd quite clearly on several occasions that she told Mr. Myers precisely this information. Now, if you read Mr. Myers' article, you won't see this in there. So if this is true, and I have no doubt what they're saying, and as Dale Myers said in his article, he rates both the sister and Ladd as being very credible. Well, I concur. And she's saying she explained this, and yet it is not appearing in the Myers article. So maybe Mr. Myers would like to explain. He doesn't do too many conversations where somebody questions him on something, but I'd like to question him on this one and have him explain why it never got a mention. Because it's the thrust of his whole paper. Was she there or not? Now, which house is she in? To be quite honest, I think you can take those 7 points and have that out of either house. And I remember talking to Matt Dewitt about this very point, and he acknowledged that. Although Matt,
I've just pulled up the PowerPoint again. Can you see that at all, Gavin?
Sorry.
I've just pulled.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
And so these are the 2 potential Holand houses. 3 in on 10th here with a view to the drive, and then this apartment block here on Patton, where you would have had a view to the sort of the back end of the alley. So in short, it justifies the last point that you've made, that it doesn't actually matter which house Holand was living in at the time.
And when I first was contacting Ladd and trying to get some clarification, he certainly wasn't clear exactly where he was living. He was adamant he was not in the Patton at the 10th Street house until after. And it was actually my submission that got Dale Myers, he won't acknowledge this, to change his article, because within 24 hours of me submitting this correction, his new article appeared. It's almost like one he prepared earlier. But that basically confirmed from the Coles directory their 10th Street address prior to the Patton Street address. So as I said, people can be very certain about what they think. This is, I believe this is how it was, and actually find out, well, actually it's not correct, but they're totally convinced, and that's fine. But as I said, I don't think it's actually, it's a moot point which place. You can be seeing that from either. And as I said, to me, the important part is if this information was passed to Mr. Myers, why didn't he include it in the article? It also then, if it is correct, and he hasn't included this in the article, begs to his credibility, and what else is he not telling us?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you want another YouTube video played, Gavin?
Yeah, look, you could probably, I think it's the second one where Helen Markham's a little bit older. Talk about going across the vacant lot. There's three of them. They all basically say the same thing. And some like,
is it this one? Being interviewed by Mark Lane, I think. Is this the one?
no, Mark Lane isn't interviewing it. I think it's the one where she's walking up south on Patton towards the camera.
Oh, this one. No, that's. You don't think it's this one?
Motion. He calmly crawled out of his car and he started around to the front of the car.
I can't see that one, Neil, but it's not that one. But
front wheel, that's on the driver's side. This man shot him 3 times in the wink of your eye. And then he turned and he was fooling with this gun and he came back down 10th Street toward me. And he saw me, he stopped. And he looked at me, I looked at him. And he was serious, his eyes were big, of course mine were too. And all it was, I put my hands above my face like this, real tight, closed my eyes, and I stood there. And then I opened my fingers, opened my eyes, and grabbed his on the neck. Well, I don't know what happened to him, but he just went off in a little trot across the vacant lot of it. And then the police came, they take me down to the city hall. And of course they got statements. And then I identified him in the lineup. Then he got out of the car.
Is it this one from the man who killed Kennedy?
I can't actually see them, Neil. I'm not sure what's. I've still got the old PowerPoint slides in front of me. I'm not sure what others have got.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Let me just. Maybe it's the. Why does that happen then? I'll stop share and start again. It just might be that it's stuck on a different pane. Yeah. This one, the men from the men who killed Kennedy.
Not sure.
Police were broadcasting a wanted description that closely fitted Oswald. Who provided that description is not known, but it led to the immediate arrest of Oswald lookalikes, even in Fort Worth, 30 miles away.
Attention all squad. Suspect in the shooting at Elm and Houston is reported to be an unknown white male, approximately 30, Westerfield, 5 feet 10 inches, weight 165 pounds, reported to be armed with what is thought to be a 30 caliber rifle.
Meanwhile, the real Oswald had made his way to a taxi rank a short distance from the depository, and after politely offering the first cab in line to another passenger, had asked to be driven to the street where he lived in Oak Cliff. At his lodgings, he rushed to his room, collected a jacket and revolver, and was last seen by his landlady shortly after 1 p.m., standing at the bus stop outside 1026 North Bedford. A mile from Oswald's rooming house, in another part of Oak Cliff, a further drama was unfolding. Waitress Helen Markham, on her way to work, was about to become the principal witness to a brutal slaying.
I was standing here on this corner, waiting on the traffic. So I could go down and catch my bus to go to work. And a man come walking down the sidewalk, and a policeman came. I could not get across.
The policeman in a patrol car was Officer J.D.Tippit. According to Helen Markham's account, Tippit stopped his car and got out to continue his conversation with the man on the sidewalk.
Just as the policeman got in front of the hood of the car, that man shot him 3 or 4 times. And then he put his gun back in his pants. He run over here And I put my hands, I just put my hands up on my face like this. Waited for a few minutes and I opened them up and I pulled them down. And he looked at me and I looked at him and I never said a word. And just like a flash of lightning, with big glassy eyes, he went off across the field. That's that lot there. Down, right across there, went over the fence and down the alley.
Yeah, that was a different escape route, Gavin.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably put the Aquila Clemens on. I mean, we've all seen it, but it's probably just worth pointing out some of her body language in that video.
You want Aquila Clemens? Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mrs. Clemens, where were you on November 22nd, 1963?
I was looking for Miss Madeline. 327 East 10th. Just down the block from where Tippit was here.
Did you know Officer Tippit?
Yes, I saw him pretty many times.
And did you hear the shots?
Yes, I heard the shots.
And what did you do?
I ran out into the street and looked down the street, and I ran back down the street where he was lying, and I looked at him.
Now, when you heard the shots and you went out of the house, did you see a man with a gun?
Yes, I did.
What was he doing?
Oh, he was reloading it. When I said he was reloading his gun.
And how would you describe that man?
Well, he's kind of chunky. He's kind of heavy. He wasn't a very big man.
Was he tall or short?
Yeah, he's kind of short guy.
Short and heavy?
Yes.
Was there any other man there?
Yeah, there's one on the other side of the street. All I know, he told him the gun.
Mrs. Clemens, the man who had the gun, did he make any motion at all to the other man across the street?
No more told him the gun.
Well, he waved his hand and said, go on.
Gone.
And then what happened with the man with the gun?
Oh, he unloaded and reloaded.
And what did the other man do?
Man kept going straight down the street.
And then did they go in opposite directions?
Yes, they were. They went together. They went this way from each other. One down the shooting went this way. Other went straight down past street that way.
What was the man who did not do the shooting, but the man who went in the other direction from the man with the gun? What was he wearing, if you remember?
Well, I felt like remember, looked like light khakis and a white shirt.
And was he tall or short?
He was tall.
And was he heavy or thin?
He was thin.
But the one who did the one who had the gun, seconds after Tippit was shot, he was short.
Yeah, he was short and kind of heavy.
Now, did you testify before the Warren Commission about this?
I haven't said anything to anyone.
Did anyone come to see you after the murder of Officer Tippit?
Yes, he was a man who came, I don't know what he was. He came to my house and talked to me. But I don't know what he looked like a policeman to me.
He did. Did he have a gun?
Yes, he wore a gun.
Mrs. Clemens, how long after Tippit was shot did this man with a gun come to visit you?
About 2 days. It was about 2 days. Said that I might get hurt. Someone might hurt me if I would talk.
About what you saw?
What I saw. He just told me to be the best if I didn't say anything because I might get hurt.
Okay. You want me to show? Sorry, do you want me to show you the other Helen Markham video that you had lined up? This one here or not?
No, probably I'll just make a couple of comments on the Aquila Clemens. Shirley Martin, and I put it in the document, pretty well reiterated the comments about going across the vacant lot. Now, what I was talking about with the body language with Aquila is when she's looking at the camera, she's using her left hand to go down the street. That's the way she's sort of she's orientating herself as she's looking south. She's using the left hand, man down pattern, and the other one off here, which is to the vacant lot. So she actually describes the person doing the shooting as going across the vacant lot, which would not be Oswald. If Oswald's gone down south on pattern, it's the other man. But that's just an observation. I think you could be fairly certain that's the way she's describing the direction. One's gone straight down pattern, which uses the left hand. She uses the right arm to signal going off to the right or to the west, which is the vacant lot. Just going back, if I could, just to the second police car. Like I said, I think it's more important than a lot of other things in this story. The planted witnesses in the second police car are absolute confirmation of a planned intercept point. As I said, I think the mistake was made in that if Tippit had a partner, you might have had a different outcome. But the second police car, I think, to me, is beyond doubt now of what we've got, saying there is one. As to the alley and access in and out, the police or whoever's planning this can make access in and out of the place without any problem at all. In fact, I found it was very odd listening to some commentary on this. I remember, I think Matt Dewitt has been on, it was a Midnight Rider podcast, and talked about she may have been in the other place at 10th Street visiting friends or something. But then he says, based on the aerial photographs, there's no second police car. I just find that very, very odd. There's some pretty good corroboration there from Markham, but the one that's stood the test of time, as far as I'm concerned, is Helan. And like I said, word for word in that article, Ladd has signed off on it being 100% accurate.
Okay.
And the only other thing is just a little bit of comment on the Italian man, which is what Helen Markham's saying. It's an 18-year-old wearing the dark coat and the jeans and the the bodgy look from the day. And it's just very interesting that when she got to the police station for the lineup, she was interviewed by Bart Odom, FBI, who's got his report, whatever they call it, 302 or something, 301. Anyway, it's in there. You can read it. And that description is not Oswald, the 18-year-old, black hair. I forget the other bits and pieces. But what I found, again, very odd, does the Warren Commission get Bart Odom to explain where he got that from? Did he just dream that up, or he's written a report? He's a professional FBI agent. He's interviewed somebody. He's wrote it down. So no, they don't. All they do is they get Helen Markham in a testimony and get her to deny she's saying it. That's peculiar. That's very peculiar. The Italian man, according to Helen Markham, has gone across the vacant lot, and there seems to be certain corroboration. Clemens, others, about person going across the vacant lot. The only other one point I would make, and I'll pretty well then finish, Neil, is that the Markham gang talked about, and this particularly was coming from Laverne talking about what her husband William told her, that Oswald told the gang he was going to take out the president. Now, again, they couldn't understand it, talking like this. It just didn't make sense. If you go into the records, you will find FBI reports. I think there's about 18 pages. You can look them up on Mary Farrell, where the FBI interviewed James Markham. I think Helen Markham was also there for it in August of '64 about this very claim. And then they get in talking about this person called Tolliver, who's an associate apparently of Oswald. The FBI reports, as far as I'm concerned, are just basically bringing it up and then just knocking it over to say, yes, we've checked this out, nothing to see here. But it's just interesting that the Markham family to this day is still saying that Oswald told them he was, going to take out the president, which, and then we got corroboration that back in '64, James Markham was interviewed about this very claim. Now, I don't know what all that means. There's only one member of the Markham family recognised the name Tolliver. Others didn't, but one did. So as being somebody associated with the gang. So what was all that about? What was Oswald doing with the gang? Was he given some tasking to infiltrate as an FBI, informant doing intelligence gathering? It's either that or he's just looking for some cash. But that's the information that they've provided. And Neil, I think, apart from Earl and Roberts talking about Oswald walking out with a short grey coat, which is on video, the radio interview, which I also found very strange that they didn't take an affidavit from her that very day, given her proximity to the suspect en route to 10th and Patton. Her first affidavit or statement appears on about the 4th of December. But that's about it, Neil. I think I've covered everything we want to cover.
Do you want me to play the Gladys Johnson or the Erling Roberts interviews?
You could possibly play the early. The Gladys one's just very interesting that she, again, I think it's 2 days after, talks about Oswald not going home the weekend before. He was according to her, at the rooming house the weekend before. Don't know what that means, but it's an interesting bit of intel.
Okay, so sorry, I'm just trying to get up the YouTube. So you want the Erling or the Gladys?
No, I think they're the early. It's just the radio interview they did with her that afternoon, and then all of a sudden the radio guy is surprised when he finds out you saw him today.
Okay.
Suspect in the assassination of President Kennedy. He's 24-year-old Lee Oswald, reported to have been a former Marine, and we'll have in a moment an interview with the housekeeper of Lee Oswald. Is that about ready, Joe? Ready. All right. We take you now, Joe. Where is the housekeeper located? Let's see now. 1026 North Beckley in the Oak Cliff area of Dallas. So we take you there now.
Mrs. Roberts, did you have a man registered there as O.H. Lee?
Yes, so that's why you're registered here.
And that's the man you now know to be Lee Oswald, is that right?
Yeah, so that's what the same one that showed on the television.
That's the one that showed on television. Have there been some officers?
That's how they recognize him when the deputy sheriff was here.
The deputy sheriff was there.
Well, yes, the deputy sheriff. We'll check that out.
They came out from the police department or the sheriff's office. How long had Mr. Lee lived there?
That's the 14th of October.
Did he live there alone?
Yes, sir.
Do you know what his occupation was?
No, I don't. I never heard him say. He didn't talk to nobody much.
When was the last time you saw him?
Today, after I heard the president of the shop.
You saw him today?
Yes.
Where did you see him?
He was here in the house.
Oh, and what happened? Can you tell us?
Well, I had to make it clear. I had a telephone call. I do all work myself. A friend of mine called me and said, President Kennedy's been shot. I said, oh, you're all right. He said, go turn on the television. And I went and turned on the television. And while I did, he rushed in the shirt sleeves, got a short coat, and went back out.
Oh, he just came in and out. Did he seem distraught, hurried, or what?
Well, he just acted like he was in a hurry.
And what did you do? Did you call the police then? Or?
No, sir, I didn't know nothing. I didn't see.
You had no idea at all that there was any connection between the two.
I didn't have any idea. And I spoke to him, and he just ignored me.
I see.
But that's unusual. Sometimes he speaks, sometimes he didn't. I didn't call because I didn't know who killed him. I just turned the TV on.
And but he came in and went out. That was this afternoon, I
That was this afternoon. This late a friend of mine called me and said President Kennedy's been shot, and I went in and turned on the television. And while I was there getting this straightened out, he come in. I said, well, you sure are in a hurry. He never answered me.
Excuse me, go ahead.
And he come in, got a short gray coat, and went all back out in a hurry. And when I looked at the window, he was standing at the bus stop. So there's a bus stop here at the door.
Waiting
waiting for a bus.
I suppose so, but I didn't see him go to the.
And that was the last time you saw the man you knew as O.H. Lee, and has since been identified to you as Lee Oswald. Thank you very much. And here, Gordon, is a late report from KOIF's Gary DeLon at police.
Okay. Yeah, that was interesting. Okay, is that the conclusion of the points that you want to make, Gavin?
Yeah, basically it's the accumulation of all of that information plus the other research that I put in the document that brings me to the point that it was a planned clandestine operation, and that's the location they picked. And I would certainly recommend Buchanan's book. And as I said, I'll send you the link, Neil. You can read it online for free because I think it's been underestimated given this information we've now got.
Okay, well, look, there's so much to unpack from today's presentation. Can I just open it to the floor? Any questions that you may have?
Hi, Gavin.
Yep, Paul.
Yeah, is it true that Tippit was well known in the area, because he seemed to be known by some of the people who were there? Do you think he had a girlfriend there or something else? Yeah,
there was certainly some discussion about him visiting the area to see somebody. Tom Tilson, who was a friend of his, the pallbearer at his funeral, went on record and said that he was visiting a girl there. Brownlow and Pulte, I've put in the document, referring to a lady by the name of Sunshine. They did give me the name, but I'll just wait and see whether somebody else is able to figure out if this person does exist. And she was from the Colony Club. I did message somebody who used to work at that place, but they haven't responded. And then, of course, the other one that does come up is Joy Dale was being mentioned as being it's in the Warren Commission record somewhere about some police report or something having an address at 410 10th Street, but it wasn't sure east or west. So there certainly appears to be some indication that yes, there was somebody there he was visiting. Scoggin's made the point of saying he used to see him all the time. Well, I now look at that comment a bit differently. I don't think that's meaning right there at 10th Street all the time. I think that Scoggins, who's an Oak Cliff taxi driver, says he sees Tippit in Oak Cliff, doing around the place because they're on the road all the time. But he's a patrol car, obviously he's a taxi driver.
Yeah. Thanks.
Gavin, the reason Oswald never went out to Irvine the weekend, on the week before the assassination was because Ruth Payne forbade him to go because she didn't want him around her daughter's birthday party. So that's why he was persona non grata at Irvine the week before the assassination.
That's good, and we can take that as gospel.
Well, yeah. It's I think it's Marina, because I think Marina talked about it. And yeah, it was Ruth Payne's daughter's birthday. Apparently, the reason given was Michael Payne and Oswald didn't get on, and that's why Oswald was not allowed to be at the house that weekend.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting. And wonder what he was doing.
No idea. But it's that's why, in my opinion anyway, he goes out to Irvine on the Thursday night, because he's not seen his family in like a week and a half. So, as anyone would, any father would, he'd miss his children.
Yep.
Who do you think was the in the police car that pulled up outside the rooming house? Supposedly. Yeah, there was a police car that pulled up outside about 1 o'clock and bibbed its horn, and then drove off.
Yeah, look, I don't have view, I know Penn Jones nominated a couple of names. I don't know where he was getting that from. So don't know. I know Brownlow and Pulte put a lot into the Harry Olsen involvement. And Mike was, I think, and Bill thought that Harry Olsen was not going to talk about who he was with.
What about the two? I don't know the names of the two policemen that were down the alleyway. Was it Westbrook?
Depends who you are.
And Hill and Summers and Griffin, and we're going on. There's a lot of people on the scene eventually.
I thought two turned up and they were the first on the scene, but they were supposedly parked down a alleyway, right, so they could almost see Tippit.
Well, Croy allegedly was the first guy on the scene.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
but it may well have been Poe and Allen.
Poe and Jez.
Sorry, Poe and Allen. Poe and Jez. Poe and Jez. Or
yeah, look, I can only be speculating. I don't have any information, and certainly the family had nothing to say who they were. I ran a lot of names, and nothing came back.
I've seen some programs where they've talked about two different sets of bullets at the crime scene from different guns.
That was the shells.
Yeah. The shells, sorry.
It was the shells, yeah. That's aye. The shells
don't
true? Match. Yeah, well, certainly the shells recovered at the scene apparently do not match the bullets taken out of Tippit's body.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a 3-1 and a 2-2 mismatch between the Remingtons and the Winchesters.
The Gavin, how did the plotters get Oswald to 10th and Patton? Obviously, this is a crucial aspect of the plan. Did they tell him to rendezvous with them at 10th and Patton, or was it just a stroke of luck that Oswald's walking in that area? How did the planners get him to 10th?
Well, I don't have that information. I would have included it in the document. It'd be pure speculation.
It would be an important question to ask, though, wouldn't it? Because obviously, there's all these kind of planted witnesses, and you know they've got the police car there with the Italian man, and that's like you'd think to yourself, well, you'd have to have Oswald having some prearranged meetup in 10th and Patton. They couldn't just rely on Oswald walking through the area.
Yeah, well, I don't have that information about how he's got there. As I said,
not how he's got there. Just like why would he be at 10th and Patton? Because obviously, if Oswald's destination was obviously Texas Theatre, which there is some kind of well-informed deductions that's obviously always his intended destination, then why would he be in 10th and Patton?
Well, again, I don't have the answer. If you look at Brownlow and Pulte's information, they'll suggest to you he was heading to Max Long's house, which was only a couple of houses east of the Abundant Life Church. Max Long went on record and said he owed favours back to Ruby or somebody, and that the house was being used. Brownlow and Pulte go further and start talking about Max Long being at the scene. Well, I've run that name past the family and it's not coming back with anything. So that's as I said, Brownlow and Pulte have speculated that. Myers actually talks about that in his book that Max Long came out. Max Allen Long is in the phone directory. If you look at I think it's the 61. But the word Long's not there. It's just got Max Allen. He uses all sorts of names. He's a boxer. He's connected with Ruby, all that sort of stuff. So there's a possible location before you get to the theatre, not very far from his location. If you look at Buchanan's book, he talks about Oswald being very close to his destination.
I mean, the Buchanan book was the first book ever released on this case. Quickly followed by Joachim Jostin's Assassin or Fall Guy. Do you think, being an ex-police officer, working customs and law enforcement, do you think there would have been enough evidence to convict Oswald beyond a reasonable doubt in the Tippit killing?
We are talking Texas. I really, I don't think so. I mean, if you look at standards that we would expect now, but as to what would have flown back then, no idea. I mean, they can do all sorts of, they can do all sorts of things. I mean, Mac Wallace got a 5-year suspended sentence for murder. We are in Texas, so you know. But if you look at, most people are saying, oh, I'm not an ex-police officer, by the way, I'm accustomed to, but no, I don't think there is. But you just don't know how that would have played out. What they would have fabricated, who knows? But I don't think that was. I don't think that was the plan, and I don't think it was ever going to be allowed to happen, as Mr. Ruby ensured.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Dallas police are solely to blame for Oswald's death. They facilitated it. That's for sure. They knew there was active threats made against his life, yet they still transferred him in that way. As I've always said all along, if I was Oswald's family, I'd have sued the Dallas Police Department for what they did to him.
Yeah, it was quite incredible, and the showcase that was being put on. The one thing we didn't talk about, you mentioned the Dallas Police and their behaviour and all the rest of it. The wallet, we didn't talk about that so much, but I think it's again a very significant point that the family is saying that this wallet, according to Helen Markham, was reintroduced after by the younger policeman. I think there's been some communication out there, and they've decided to put it there, because I think if they've gone to do this fake arrest, or this set up arrest, it wasn't fake. They actually had supposedly him in a break and enter care of the Markham brothers. If they've got him there and they capture him and he's shot, Tippit shoots him in self-defense, they're going to have a wallet, and they're going to have a gun, because they don't know he's going to bring either to the party. And if they're going to claim that it was in self-defense, well, you've got to have a throwdown. And I think a decision was made at some point for that wallet to appear. And then a decision's been made, get it out of there so it doesn't appear. There's no such wallet exists. Well, I think most of us, well, I do, I think it is a planted wallet. Hidell Oswald, according to Barrett and others.
Yeah. Gavin, Nancy's got a question. Nancy, go ahead.
Okay, my first question is what is the prize I won? Okay, I'll leave you to think about that one. Okay, but my real question for Gavin is, how early did they decide to plant witnesses? When would Markham and Scoggins have been told, do you think?
Yeah, again, I don't know. Operations need to know, so you don't put stuff out, well in advance. Scoggins is saying it's the night before. Ken doesn't know where he was told, how he was told. Was he did they knock on his door and tell him, or was it on a phone call? So we don't know those sorts of details. And this is where it can be difficult, because we're trying to find more and more. But to me, just the fact that we're getting confirmation that he's been sent there to do a job's enough to clarify we've got a setup. It's a planned intervention at that location. And there's certainly got to be some other planted witnesses besides those two. And we had a brief chat about that.
Okay, and then just to follow up then, what about Ken made you believe? What about him made you think, kind of buy into his information in his scenario? Besides him saying these things, was there someone else in the family that corroborated anything?
What led me to believe him is his credibility, his honesty. I had at least 3, it might be 4, phone calls with him, some emails, and then eventually we did the Zoom. So by the time I've got to the Zoom message, I've gone over this thing, gone about it differently with him. You give it several days delay, then you sort of ask again slightly differently. So you're getting this information back. And it was good, because as he went on, he said, look, I'm really not sure. like about knowing Tippit, things like that. So you tease these things out to make sure that what you're putting out there is not someone's perception, it's actually what was said. And which is why we did go around a little bit about an assistant, a gopher, an employee. You know, I was trying to get him to recall what terminology, and that's the best that he can come back with. So I think he's very credible. Again, he's got no skin in the game here. He's just was contacted. I found him. And yes, there are some other relatives, and we're just following that up as we speak.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gavin, I wrote a series of articles for the 60th anniversary of President Kennedy's assassination. They're on Jim D. Genio's website, Kennedy's and King. And it was a series of 6 articles, 10 points each. And in one of the articles that I wrote, I explored this charge that, you know, Oswald was seeking fame and all this kind of stuff through the assassination of President Kennedy. Now, it was pretty interesting what you said. You said that he was apparently going around telling these men that he was going to shoot President Kennedy. President Kennedy was somebody Lee Oswald admired. That's been well documented. George de Montesquieu testified that he admired him, so did other people. So, and the other thing is as well, why would Oswald, in your opinion, be going around telling people before the fact that he was going to kill the president and then vehemently deny it when he was arrested and asked that question while he was in the custody of the Dallas police?
Yeah, look, good question, and I don't know the answer. What I've tried to do is put the information out there as they'd explain it to me. But what I just found very interesting was that James Markham's interviewed by the FBI in August 1964, and you can go and find all those records under Mary Ferrell. It's about 18 pages. And it's the most underwhelming investigation of a claim I've ever seen in my life. But he makes the claim that he was told by Oswald, and his associate was with him called Tolliver, he was going to kill the president. So I can't explain it. I'm just saying this, that the family has still mentioned that all these years later. And that's specifically from William, which is Laverne's husband of 48 years.
Which Markham was it that spoke to Vince Salandria and Marguerite Oswald?
I'm still not sure. The description that I've got, Laverne suggested it was more likely William, but I'm not sure, and she wasn't sure.
Yeah, because I'm sure it was their youngest son, because I'm pretty sure during the Feldman, when I was reading the Feldman article and Praise from a Future Generation, that this son didn't actually like his mum at all.
I think that's those FBI reports that we're referring to. So you can believe them or not.
No,
I'm not saying these guys. You've got to recall they've already spent time in prison by the time they're out in '63. I think James was out in August. I think William was out a month later. Those FBI reports will tell you he wasn't even in Dallas at the time. Well, that's false. He was there. So this family's had a pretty rough, tough upbringing. Helen Markham's come up through the Depression. These boys are street boys. They're on the street doing crime very early. Interestingly, the older brother, 1 year older, Arthur, is not. And he's in the roofing business, as was the 2 husbands of the Davis sisters. And they knew each other. He had worked for Arthur, the Davis brothers or brothers-in-law, whatever they were. I can't explain it any more than that.
What do you make of the description Helen Markham gave Mark Lane, that the killer was short, somewhat on the heavy side with bushy hair?
Well, if you really listen to that tape, I'm not quite sure I agree with what you just said.
I've got the tape. I've listened to it.
She says short and kind of heavy.
Yes.
That's what she said.
And then
Yeah, well, what do I make of it? I'm sorry, I can't tell you. I'm not in Helen Markham's head.
Yeah. It's just obviously the story of planting witnesses. This ultimately comes from Helen Markham, so that's why I thought it would be interesting to ask what your opinion on that would be. Because obviously, a man who's short, kind of on the heavy side, and with bushy hair doesn't resemble Lee Oswald.
No, I agree. So I can't really explain that one for you, John. She sort of sometimes like not too heavy, and so Mark Lane did I think he repeated that question to her about like 6 or 7 times. But anyway, but no, I can't explain that.
Because Markham testifies when she's talking about. Because I can't remember. Did you say that Helen Markham knew Lee Oswald prior to the Tippit case killing? Sorry.
Correct.
So
I put it in the article that he's actually been to her place at 9th Street. The gang used to meet at the back. They used to meet at Scoggin, which is just around from the Texaco. So yes, she did. Which is why when she's there to watch the arrest, it's not just the arrest of a person, it's the arrest of Oswald.
Yeah, because obviously she testifies when she's asked, do you recognise anyone in the lineup? She says, no, sir. And then did you see anybody? I've asked you that question before. Did you recognise anybody from their face? From their face, no. Did you identify anybody in these 4 people? I didn't know nobody. I know you didn't know anybody, but did anybody in that lineup look like anybody you'd seen before? No, I had never seen none of them. None of these men. That's what she testified to.
Yeah, and I covered that a little bit in the article. I'm just, again, suggesting that someone who's been threatened and controlled and scripted would have had it ringing in her ears. You do not know Oswald. You've never seen him before. And I think she's misunderstood the questioning that's going on.
I know I've heard the debate with Mark Lane and Joseph Ball, where Joseph Ball calls her an utter screwball. I also know that certain members of the Warren Commission didn't want to actually use Helen Markham, but they were forced into it because she was really the only witness that claims to have saw the killing. So make no mistake about it, if Oswald had went to trial, Helen Markham would have been the prosecution's star witness.
Yep.
Gavin, can you clarify the Garrison article? What was that? Did you say it was issue 15?
Yeah, it's Garrison, the journal, History and Deep Politics, issue 15. I think it was November last year, 2024, 2023.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is it, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter, this is the book here.
It's got about 250 pages. There's Ed Tatro. There's a number of people have put some good articles in there. So mine's about 60 pages, but it's quite a big booklet. So you can get it online. It's cheaper. I don't know what the cost is in the UK. I can guarantee you I'm not being paid for any of this because I had to buy my own 3 versions of that hard copy that I've got.
Okay.
Gavin, before can I just ask, what do you think of Larry Harris's work on the Tippit case?
Yeah, I understand his manuscript has surfaced, so it'll be very interesting to see how that rolls out. Look, he's done some very good stuff. I know he is certainly of the opinion that tapes and things have been altered. He's done some articles, some interviews. I've watched a few of those. So yeah, no, interesting.
Do you know he got a job as a postman in Oak Cliff so he could go around and speak to witnesses?
Yeah. Bill Pulte told me all about that because he used to drive around with him. He said he was a terrible driver, very fast, and wasn't surprised. And we did have an accident because he said he was a bad driver. But they went on some jobs, and Larry kind of imparted some information to Bill, which I won't share at the moment. But he certainly got in amongst it. One of the few, when you think about it, to get out and do that sort of thing, because I think that would have been a pretty dangerous situation to be in. If you've got involvement of a police setup and the mob involved, gee, I wouldn't want to be mucking around too much there.
I think like there's some really good work. I know when we were in JFK Lancer, watching Matt Doutett's Tippit presentation, he dedicated it to Larry Harris.
Right.
Okay. Can I just make a couple of points, Gavin? I just wanted to clarify that short and kind of heavy quote. That was from Akila Clemens, not Markham. I was referring to. So, just wanted to clarify that, so that
yeah,
just in the in the interest of fairness, that was Akila Clemens. Couple of other things I thought. Did you feel that Murray Jackson, he wasn't actually looking the interviewer in the eye when you played that video? It's kind of very obvious to me. Reminds me a little bit of Tippit. He wouldn't look at anybody in the eye.
Yeah, interesting. He was only in that dispatch, I think he'd only been there about 3 or 4 days. To me, that was Eddie Barker seemed to do a few of these sort of interviews where they're trying to get a message out that everything's fine, hunky-dory. But I think there's a few little slips there. And I think, if you've got a citizen out on the street that hears gunshots, calls up the police, 000 or whatever it is, and the police operator writes it down, they're not going to write down a disturbance and hand it to the police radio dispatcher. It's going to have the word gunshots in it somewhere. So that's very, very strange. So I think there's some sort of a bit of a slip there by Murray. And we're actually still talking about this other disturbance, which would have been in the back of Murray. They wouldn't have had to have Murray Jackson involved in that, because the script could just be placed at a certain time and broadcast. It could have been pre-prepared. But
yeah, of course, he also said the 400 block, which is wrong. That disturbance is probably the 600 block, isn't it? If it's Marsalis.
Correct. Yeah. And so this is just about the time when the radio went off.
That feels a bit nefarious as well, actually, to support the point that you're making.
But I think if you go back, I'm going to send you that other article I did on the radio, because there's a lot more detail in the transcripts. And look, I've talked to some people who are pretty knowledgeable on the transcripts and whatever, and I get it that yes, there can be some adjustments and things. But when you start to see, for example, that 2108 calls confirmed by Bales and Bugliosi, and it morphs into 2 different numbers, and no one knows who those police are, that's cover. That's taking it out of the equation, because the obvious question is, why is he calling? Why has Tippit called Murray Jackson 5 minutes, if that timing is correct, after Murray Jackson tried to call him and didn't get an answer?
Yeah.
Wasn't the usual dispatcher a female that got given a ticket for the Dallas Trade Mart?
Yeah, I think that is correct. And I think there was 1 or 2 others still in there as well. So there was at least 2, might have been 3 dispatchers, but she was, yeah, I remember reading about that.
The other thing,
Gavin, have you ever read the assassination tapes by George O'Toole?
I'd have to have a look and see where I've got that. What was he on about?
He done. It's quite hard to explain. He basically it was like voice stress analysis on Oswald's when he was in custody, etc. And he concluded that Oswald hadn't shot anyone. He sent these voice these what am I trying to say here? He sent the footage of Oswald, talking, saying that he hadn't shot anybody, hadn't shot Tippit or the president.
to this guy who was like one of the born most renowned specialists in the United States. And this guy got back to him and basically said that Oswald was telling the truth. He hadn't actually shot anybody. So it's quite an interesting point. Just because obviously I don't believe Oswald shot anybody. I believe he's completely innocent. But yeah, if you don't know about it, you should definitely look it up. I think the guy's name, I can't remember what the guy's name was, but it's certainly an interesting thing. I think the guy says based on the clips that George O'Toole had sent him, that Oswald was telling the truth when he claimed he hadn't shot anybody. Oh, here we go. Hitchcock. So it says he analysed the psychological stress evaluator. The tape recordings who O'Toole provided with the voice of Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald's comments regarding the circumstances of his arrest and his statements that he had been denied legal representation show considerable situation stress. When he is asked, "Did you kill the president?" his reply, "No, I've not been charged with that," shows no harder stress than found in his earlier comments. In replying to the question, "Did you shoot the president?" his reply, "No, I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir," contains much less stress than I found in his earlier statements regarding legal representation made only moments before. My PSC analysis of these recordings indicate very clearly that Oswald believed he was telling the truth when he denied killing the president. Assuming that he was not suffering from a psychopathological condition that made him ignorant of his own actions, I can state beyond reasonable doubt that Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill President Kennedy and did not shoot anybody else.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember, I'll have to send you the link. I remember seeing somebody else doing something similar and going the opposite direction of that, saying that he's lying and he did do it. Anyway, interesting. You'll have to send me the link.
It's the assassination tapes by George O'Toole. I think it was released in, oh God, maybe 70s or 80s. But O'Toole does talk. There is a short clip on YouTube of him talking about that, and that's why he says Oswald was completely innocent. But yeah, it was just an interesting thing I thought I'd bring up.
Yep.
Another thing that struck me, Gavin, about the videos that clips you showed me was how articulate Earlene Roberts was, actually. How forthright and articulate, because she's made out to be, half blind, potentially erratic witness. But I thought she came across very lucidly.
Yeah. And I mean, I just thought that was sort of interesting. I know there's always a lot of discussion about the grey coat and the white jacket and all that sort of stuff, and I get it. By the time she gets to the Warren Commission, I think she's talking about a darker coat, isn't she? Anyway, so I think for the time she's getting there, she's in all sorts of confusion and what number of the police car, all sorts of stuff. So, but there she is on I presume that's sort of early evening. She's talking about him being on the TV, so she's seen some photo of Oswald on the TV. Fritz had sent them around, these policemen or whatever. As I said, I found it a bit odd she wasn't, they didn't take an affidavit from her that day. But yeah, she's talking about putting on a short grey coat and out to the bus stop, standing there.
Okay. Just one other point I wanted to make, and we communicated by email. There is on the 6th floor oral histories archives. There is one that has been done by David and Denise Dulworth, who are the granddaughter and married to the granddaughter of Helen Markham. It is not up there in video form at the moment, or audio form, but I'm going to contact I'm going to contact the 6th floor to see if they can post that, or if nothing else, get the transcript, because this was out there in inverted commas, but possibly not. Maybe it was just Gary Mack, or maybe a young Stephen Fagan that interviewed that couple. But it was out there some decades ago, and I think that'd be quite interesting to see if it corroborates some of the stuff that you've learned from Laverne.
Yeah. Agree.
I will look into that. Is there any other comments that you want to make before we close this, or any other questions?
No, well, my only sort of summary is just to say that I hope there's some new information here that people might consider when they look at the whole event. I think we've always seen it and fixed in our mind this is how it kind of went down, because that's what we've heard for a long time. So in some regards, to look at new information, you have to unknow what you previously think happened.
I mean, I think that's fair enough, Gavin. I mean, we see that all the time. I mean, there are people that believe that Oswald didn't even live at Beckley, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, it is, and I quite like where Brooks is going with, if he did get a taxi, then he got dropped off at the, at the 1026 Greater Junction area. And if that is the case, that completely throws timings out all over the show. So I think you're right that one ought to be open-minded. I would urge people to get this article either in a hard copy format or digital form. There's lots of stuff in there that Gavin hasn't even touched on, today. About potentially Batchelor being the mastermind of this in the DPD, Olsen's role you didn't really get into, the Oswald being in two gangs, lots of things there that you could find out.
Yeah.
Gavin, can I ask one more question, if that's okay?
Yeah.
It's more about the police officers in the car witnessing the struggle and the murder of Officer Tippit. Why do you think these two police officers never tried to intervene?
Don't know, Johnny. They've made a decision by the looks of it. Certainly the information from the markups is that they haven't taken off after them. Although, as you'll see in the article, it does say that one of the officers then did go with the rest of the police to go look for Oswald or the Italian. But as to why they didn't respond at the time, don't know.
If you were in that position, if you were one of the two officers, would you have went out and tried to intervene?
Look, Johnny, would you? I mean, it's all speculation. I don't think we get far going down that road. I'm just relaying the information that they've said this is what happened.
No, I appreciate that. I was just asking your opinion on it, that's all.
You don't know if they've been involved in this thing as well, and it's backfired, not the outcome that's supposed to happen. Maybe they've just got cold feet. But again, Helen Markham saying that the older of the two policemen did come out, and there we are, Virginia Davis in her testimony talking about the police were already there when we went out. Well, she may not have been able to see that police car, which would have been between the houses. But certainly if there was a police officer out there who then just disappeared, it wouldn't look that unusual if you've got another policeman out there gone out to a policeman on the ground. But they, from the Markham account, they did not pursue the two men.
Gavin, have you got plans for publication of a book on your research?
Not at all. So I've just put that publication over to S.T. Patrick. A researcher put me onto him, a well-known researcher, and said, look, he'll put it out there. So I've got no intentions to do a book. And as I said earlier on in the piece, I'm not being paid anything for what I'm writing. And the Markham certainly not. No intention. But I will try and get these other articles, including that 14-pager that Ken has signed off, the radio log stuff I've done, and try and get them to Neil so we can post them.
Yeah, you said in one of our calls, Gavin, that you'd be happy for us to put them on the DPUK website. Is that okay?
Right. Yep. Means that the public's got them then. But no, I've got no intention to do a book. This writing capers for the birds.
No, and I think that's commendable, the fact that you want to share your research with us. Really
absolutely. Nice. Absolutely. Do you know, Gavin, have you reached out to Greg Parker? He's a fellow.
Yes. Yes, he's a cockroach south of the border, Sydney boy. We've been in touch. Look, it's up to Greg. I've seen Greg's paper. He's done a paper, as you're aware, I'm sure, Johnny, with his view on it and the gang and what might have been afoot there. That's the position he comes with. I don't know that there was a lot of information that they were receiving to come to that view. Whereas I think this thing, I'm getting information that's saying this is what happened. Yeah, I got a lot of time for Greg, and he's done some really good work.
Yeah, I like
He was going to have a conference some years ago, and then I think he got a bit crook. It was pre-COVID, and I actually had booked to go down to Sydney, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, I like Greg. I've known Greg for a lot of years.
Gavin, just before we started, there was a conversation with, I don't know if it was Paul Patterson or Hugo. It was just the people that were very early on the call about William Seymour being located by an Australian researcher down in Oz. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh, I'm not sure. Who's the William Seymour again? I've heard the name, but it's not springing up as.
He's one of the Interpen guys. You know, this whole lot of Roy Hargreaves. Help me out here, Peter. No, Hemming Hargreaves.
Oh, yeah, one of those. And he's supposed to have lived in Australia?
Lauren Hall. Yes, apparently it was. I don't know. I think the person has gone now, but it was one of the people.
It was me.
Oh, it was you, Alan. Sorry.
Yeah, I was told by John Simpkin, who did the Education Forum, a long time ago at Canterbury. He told me that William Seymour was alive and he actually monitored the forum, but he didn't comment on it. But I don't know the significance. I know Tony Basing, through his secret contacts, was absolutely certain it was William Seymour. He thought he killed Tippit, and he hid in the basement of the Abundant Life Temple. But I don't know what his source is. But another person who came to, I can't remember his name, but a guy came to Canterbury before lockdown, and he said that he had been contacted by another Australian researcher called James Richards, who had located William Seymour, but we don't know. There's no way of knowing whether William Seymour was connected or not.
How old would he be now?
'90s.
The only significance of William Seymour is that the FBI said he was the guy who visited Sylvia Rodeo. So Seymour denied it. But the interesting thing there is if the FBI thought that Seymour was imitating Oswald at the audio incident, why didn't they think he might have been imitating Oswald elsewhere? But they obviously didn't.
Yeah.
Which Oswald, Harvey or Lee?
That's the big question. William Seymour is just one of those names that's cropped up. It's cropped up in quite a few different people's articles, and I don't know why, because he was a fairly insignificant guy. So why did various people write him into the story?
Yeah, not sure.
There was a suspect that fled into a library as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, that was Adrian. That was Adrian Hamby. He was a teenager, Johnny.
Yeah,
that was the great library dash, which is also quite convoluted. Going back to the church, you look at the tapes. Sergeant Hill, does a shakedown there. Says he's going to go into the church to shake it down, and I think Nick MacDonald was there as well.
I think a lot of the Seymour story, it comes from the books written by Robert D. Morrow, not the Robert Morrow who turns up now, but Robert D. Morrow, the CIA operative. I think he was the source of the William Seymour story.
Right.
He's posting on the education forum at the moment.
Yeah,
Robert Morrow.
yeah. There's two. The problem is there's two of them. There's Robert D. Morrow, who worked for the CIA, and I think he's now dead. And there's a Robert Morrow who's still alive, who comments on all the forums, but it's not the same person.
Okay.
It's confusing. I mean, you wouldn't think, what are the odds on being two Robert Morrows concerned with the story? It's not a common name, but no, Robert D. Morrow, the CIA operative, he was contacted by a researcher, and I think some of the stories come from him, but he wrote two books. One's called First-Hand Evidence, I think, and they're written in a sort of pseudo James Bond type style. You know, they're quite a difficult read, but there is little bits of correct information if you can decode it. Everybody's got different names. William Seymour turns up as a guy called Bill Gamello, which is kind of Italian for twin. So it's very difficult to decode, but some people think it's got it's got a lot of truth in it, even though it's written as like a sort of James Bond type novel.
Yeah,
that's it.
Alan, I'm going to show you a photograph of William Seymour, and you can just determine whether that is an Oswald lookalike.
Not really.
Doesn't really.
Let's do that again, Neil, please.
This is a photograph of William Seymour.
We're back in a minute, Nick.
No, it doesn't look anything like him. Eh?
I don't think so.
Nah, not at all. Was that?
That's
When did you get that?
From the Warren Commission.
Ah, I see. Have you got your book yet, Neil?
No, I haven't. And this one here is Larry Crayford.
Yeah, see.
So you must have come across these photos before, Johnny.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. See, this is the thing, right? See, a glance with someone running away, you could think that is Oswald.
You could.
You could think it was Oswald.
You could think Michael Payne as well, though, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could. Believe it or not, you could. But this is the thing, like how it all goes back to the old thing of how reliable are witnesses, how reliable are recollections. You know, I mean, look what Lavelle had said to Calloway. We want to be sure. We want to wrap him up real tight on killing this officer. We think he's the same one that killed the president, and if we can wrap him up tight on killing this officer, then we've got him. That just has to influence any witness.
Yeah.
Yep.
No. But yeah, witness recollections are notoriously unreliable. But it's quite funny how people who advocate for Oswald's guilt dismiss all the witnesses in Dealey Plaza who run towards the picket fence, but they find every single witness in the Tippit case who pointed the finger at Oswald as credible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask? I assume, does anybody here think that Roscoe White did it?
No comment.
Well,
no comment.
We'll be doing a Roscoe White feature at some point. We'll be doing a Zoom cast, I think.
Yeah. The late Matthew Smith was convinced it was Roscoe White, but I don't know based on what.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting book that's been written by Brian Edwards and Gary Shaw. Johnny's read it already.
Yeah, I've got it as well.
Scott and I have ordered it from them, and we've got all signed copies on their way, but still in transit somewhere. But I don't really want to comment on it yet because I haven't read the book, but I have listened to a lot of what Gary and Brian have said on various presentations and in person to me, and I think it's a very interesting idea, but I'd rather reserve judgment until I actually read, the final product. I mean, as I said, I've seen presentations and asked questions in Dallas and in Fort Worth. So, and
I had a good talk to Bill Pulte about some of the Roscoe White stuff, because Bill worked at the Assassination Research Centre both as a volunteer and also as a paid employee at various stages. And he was telling me about the first launch of the Roscoe White stuff at the press conference. I think there was Gary Mack, Mary Farrell, J. Gary Shaw, Larry Harris, Larry Howard. He went through the whole list of people there. And he sort of passed on some other little bits of information which I thought were very interesting around the whole release, which he found a bit odd. But anyway, we'll see what they come out with.
Yeah, I mean, it crashed and burned, without going into too much detail. It crashed and burned in whenever it was, 89, 90, for various reasons, including the fact that Roscoe's wife, Geneva, basically produced a fake diary because the FBI stole the diary that was allegedly found. So it really did have an absolute disastrous launch, this idea. But Gary has hung on to this material and all the evidence and so forth, and this has culminated in this co-authorship of the Ricky White story. If you're interested, there was a Zoomcast done by Project JFK a few weeks ago, and out of the blue, Ricky White, Gary Shaw, and Brian Edwards turned up on that call. I did actually ask them a question about the authentication of the witness execution book, which is another piece of material that was found. But I think it's better to, from my perspective, I need to read the book, and also I'm going to invite Gary and Brian on to do a Zoomcast for DPUK.
So do you understand, is there new information in this book that wasn't in the first release that they did?
Well, so there's several pieces of evidence that have been found by the White family in both a footlocker and a canister.
Right.
And the diary was, the claim is that the diary was stolen by the FBI, and but there's another important document. It's a book, which is the witness execution book, which is a green book, which Roscoe White is effectively admitting to being part of the team to murder Kennedy, and also claims that he killed a fellow police officer, which can only be Tippit, and eliminated other people as a professional assassin, basically.
Neil, will you have any spare copies of these signed books to sell?
I won't, but I can reach out to Michael. I tell you who's publishing it, Pete. It's Michael McCardis, who is the son of Rose Cherami.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, so he wrote his book, which he's updated with the second edition, and he was at the Chris Gallup seminar in Fort Worth, and Gary and Brian decided to publish, which is fair enough, through a small independent, which is him. I mean, I'm constantly in contact with Michael because I'm still waiting for the book, but I can reach out to see if we can get any more copies. Johnny, yours wasn't signed, was it? You just got yours on Amazon, yeah?
Yeah, mine wasn't signed. I got it on Amazon. I did reach out to Michael, and I could have bought a signed copy through the website, but this was about 2-3 weeks ago or something. He said they were in limited supply, and with the shipping calculated, I think the shipping was going to be something in the region of $50 odd,
Yeah,
and the book itself. So you get free shipping on Amazon. So I just picked up the book for 20 quid for Amazon.
Yeah, so yes, it was going to be absolutely extortionate, the shipping, and it still didn't come in that cheap. I mean, Scott and I paid $27, in situ, and we paid $28 to have it shipped to the UK. So it's a lot more expensive if you want to sign a copy, Pete.
Last week it was on Amazon at £16 now, but Amazon goes up and down every day, but it was £16 for the free delivery last week.
Mm. So it's cheaper than you, Johnny.
Well, yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I've read it. Won't go into too much of it, but yeah, it's worth a read. I really respect Gary Shaw. I think he's a fantastic researcher, and I've got Cover Up, the book he did with Larry Harris. So, and I obviously met him when I was in Dallas there. He's a great guy who just gives you his time. You know what I mean? And you can't really say any more than that. He always responds to emails. He's always trying to help you if he can. I think he's a great guy. So I think you should definitely read the book.
Okay, so should we wrap that up? Is that anything else? Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you, Gavin, for your time. Excellent, very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
no problem. Pleasure.
there is one other thing, I beg your pardon. Whilst I'm on, we've got a few of us still. We've got another Zoomcast meeting this month, which I haven't put out there yet. It'll be on the 23rd of March on Saturday normal time, and it will be Brooks LaPlante and Rick Russo, and they'll be going through the whole Bethesda stuff, which I think will be really interesting.
I'll need to check and see if Celtic are playing that day, whether I get to come or not.
Yeah. Okay. So no, that'd be really interesting, I'm sure, because of all the shenanigans around what people saw or didn't see, and they've probably got a solution to that.
Sorry, Neil, what time did you say that would be on the 23rd of March?
Yeah, well, it'll be normal time.
Oh, normal time. Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be coming in at T-5 or T-6 from the States.
Lovely. Thank you.
Well, look, let's call it a day. It's coming up to midnight, isn't it, in Brisbane, Gavin?
It's 5 minutes to midnight down under. Yes.
Okay, well, you better get to bed before you turn into a pumpkin. Thank you so much for doing this. Sorry about the technical problem. I hope it's going to be resolved. It'll be 2 uploads. And thank you very much for also offering to share your research with us.
Yeah, not a problem. My pleasure. And I like the work that Dealey Plaza UK does. Congratulations to you guys.
Okay, well, maybe we can sign you up as a member.
Yes, why not?
Okay. All right. Well, take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.
All
You
right.
too, everybody.
Thanks, Gavin.
Cheers,
Thanks, Gavin. Bye.
Adios. Bye-bye.